At a dojo, two people face each other, ready to spar while students watch from outside the door. The onlookers whisper among themselves, both curious and worried about the newcomer who is determined to defeat everyone in the dojo. A worried student asks Alucia what they should do, but she reassures them that Beryl Sensei is there, so there's nothing to worry about. The opponent lunges forward to attack first, but the master quickly steps back, dodging the blow and countering with a swift strike to the opponent's chin. In the blink of an eye, Alucia watches in awe, unable to comprehend the sheer genius of her master's swordsmanship. In the kingdom of Liberis, a land filled with knights and adventurers, a strange rumor is spreading. Many of the great heroes who have made a name for themselves were all trained under the guidance of a mysterious figure, known only as the Blackwater Holy Sword. A horse-drawn carriage rolls along a dirt road in the countryside, the driver reassuring his passenger that they are about to arrive. Inside the carriage, a young woman looks out the window, feeling nostalgic as the familiar scenery passes by. Meanwhile, at the dojo, an old man walks in and finds someone has already started training early in the morning. Beryl. The old man can't resist teasing Beryl about letting him meet a grandson before he passes away. Beryl retorts, asking if taking over the dojo and increasing the number of students isn't enough. The old man suggests that maybe Beryl should find a nice girl among his students. But Beryl dismisses the idea, claiming no one would want to marry into a humble dojo family. Beryl's thoughts drift back to the past, when he once wanted to become a knight or an adventurer, saving people with his sword. But instead, he ended up as a teacher of basic self-defense swordsmanship in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't what he had dreamed of, but it suited him, considering his skills and personality. As he thinks about this, he remembers a young student from long ago who bravely said she would marry him when she grew up. Just then, a visitor enters the dojo. It's a young woman, and Beryl recognizes her as Alucia, his former student. They sit down to talk. Beryl remarks that it's been a long time, and that she's changed a lot, though she insists he's still the same as ever. He wonders how she grew into such an impressive woman, now the commander of the Liberio Knight Order. Alucia was always a natural talent, easily absorbing his lessons. When she left the dojo, he had given her a sword as a farewell gift. Beryl notices Alucia still carries that sword, surprised she hasn't switched to something better in the city. But she reassures him that the sword he gave her is perfect. This simple answer touches his heart. Alucia explains that, alongside her duties with the knights, she also trains them in swordsmanship. Beryl is impressed and proud, realizing his former student has surpassed anything he could have ever imagined. Being an instructor for the Knight Order is a huge deal, meaning she's the best swordswoman in the kingdom. Then, Alucia dropped the shocking news. She had recommended Beryl as a special instructor for the Knight Order, and they had agreed without any objections. It took Beryl a moment to process this news. He was being asked to become a royal instructor for the Liberio Knight Order. Alucia said a carriage was waiting outside to take him to the capital, immediately, as they needed to arrange the training program. The suddenness of the request left Beryl stunned, but Alucia showed him a royal decree bearing the official seal, so he had no choice but to comply. The bustling city of Valtrin, the capital of the kingdom of Liberis, was vibrant with energy in its massive structures. The Liberio Knights gathered, buzzing with excitement and curiosity. Alucia stood before them proudly, introducing Beryl. She announced that Beryl Gardina would be their special instructor, and expected them to surpass all expectations. Beryl felt the weight of the moment. Observing the roughly 100 knights, he could tell from their posture that they were all highly skilled. Alucia continued to praise Beryl, claiming he was far beyond her own abilities, and told the knights to apply for his training. Beryl started to sweat, overwhelmed by the lofty praise and the intense stares of the knights. Then, Alucia asked him to say a few words. Internally, Beryl panicked, wondering why she would put him in such an awkward position. He introduced himself awkwardly, trying to downplay the grand introduction. Beryl felt like an ordinary middle-aged man, suddenly thrust into the spotlight. Among the knights, one seemed unimpressed, staring at Beryl with a sharp, cold gaze. A flashback to the earlier carriage ride came to mind. Beryl had been worried about the commitment, but Alucia had reassured him that visiting a few times a month would be enough, since he already had many students at his dojo. As they strolled through the capital streets, Alucia gave Beryl a tour. Beryl couldn't help but think the knights probably didn't need his guidance. Alucia, trying to lighten the mood, offered him some sweets, while Beryl felt bad for dragging her along. To buy souvenirs, he joked that his father was very particular about such things. They drew many stares as they walked, with Beryl remarking how strange it was to see the head of the Royal Knight Order with someone like him. Suddenly, a girl cut in between them, taunting Alucia for shopping with a man. Alucia called her Lysandra. Beryl observed the girl. A member of the Black Adventurer Guild, the strongest adventurers around. She looked at him in shock, then grabbed his hand tightly, crying out in surprise as she recognized him as Beryl's sensei. Beryl, wincing from her powerful grip, realized she was Selena, a former student he had taught, who was sent away for adoption about 20 years ago. Alucia, feeling left out, demanded that Lysandra let go of Beryl's hand, leading to a hostile encounter between the two women. Lysandra invited Beryl to visit their guild, but Alucia quickly asserted that Beryl would be spending his time with her, causing tensions to rise. The surrounding crowd began to whisper, recognizing Alucia and Lysandra, and wondering about the older man caught in the middle. Beryl felt trapped, silently pleading for help. They decided to visit a blacksmith shop together. The smith greeted them respectfully, especially Alucia and Lysandra. Alucia explained they were just looking around. Beryl noticed that everywhere they went, people either gossiped or showed respect, reflecting how much Alucia and Lysandra had grown. He admired the quality of the swords in the shop, curious if any were for sale. The blacksmith invited him to try a sword. Beryl went to an area with a training dummy. Lysandra and Alucia were excited to see Beryl use a sword again. Feeling the pressure of their expectations, Beryl steeled himself. He noted that even a sharp blade required skill to cut through this training dummy, which had the same toughness as a human body. Wanting to get it over with, he told himself and got into his stance. Beryl sliced through the dummy with impressive speed and precision, leaving it standing perfectly still even after being cut in two. Lysandra and Alucia were visibly impressed, while the blacksmith, stunned, exclaimed that the dummy was still standing. As they left the shop, Alucia asked if it was okay that they didn't buy anything. Beryl shrugged, saying he hadn't brought much money either. He wanted to say more but held back. He seemed to notice something strange about the sword from the shop earlier. The blacksmith realized in astonishment that the sword Beryl had used was a dull, unfinished blade that had been accidentally put up for sale by an apprentice. The blacksmith yelled at his workers, realizing that Beryl's skill was all the more impressive for using a dull blade. Alucia replied that she also knew the master swordsman's blade from the countryside was still in perfect condition. Beryl sat on a carriage heading home, lost in thought. He was now an instructor for the Knight Order, a role he felt he owed more to Alucia's favor than his own ability. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was deceiving the knights. If he made a mistake, it wasn't just his reputation on the line, but Alucia's as well. He was determined to figure things out once he got home. When he arrived at the dojo, he was greeted by his father's unexpected words, who told him not to come home for a while, leaving him momentarily confused. Later, at Alucia's house, Beryl broke the news about being kicked out of the dojo. He recounted the events that led to this sudden decision. When Beryl had returned home earlier, he was greeted by his father and a former student named Landred. Landred, who had been an adventurer for some time, had just had a child, which made him decide to retire. Beryl was happy to see Landred doing well. But amidst his happiness, he asked Landred what he would do next. But the old man answered instead. He had handed the dojo over to Landred and instructed him to go to Valtrene to take on his new duties, much to his shock. Landred assured Beryl that he would take good care of the dojo. Another thing was that the old man wanted Landred to find a wife during his time there, and not to come home until he did. Alucia saw this situation as advantageous for her but concealed her reaction. Beryl, needing a place to stay, apologized to Alucia for the inconvenience. She happily invited him to stay at her place, but Beryl firmly refused. They decided to visit the Adventurers Guild. Alucia thought the guild would be a good place to gather information on potential lodgings, while Beryl was impressed by the lively atmosphere there. They ran into Selena in her everyday clothes. She quickly adjusted her appearance, not expecting to run into Beryl so suddenly. Beryl explained his situation and asked for help, and she immediately agreed. Selena suggested a place near the guild hall, emphasizing its safety. However, Alucia insisted on a place closer to her house. Since Beryl had new duties at the barracks, the tension between Alucia and Selena grew as they lost sight of the purpose of their discussion. They both drew their swords, swinging at the same time. Unexpectedly, Beryl confiscated both of their swords. With blinding speed, it turned out he had been prepared for this to prevent them from fighting. The result was just a draw. Beryl had been worried for a moment, thinking they were actually going to fight. In the end, they decided on a different location suggested by Selena. Beryl thought it was quite good. Although it was a bit far from the barracks and the guild, he appreciated its proximity to the market and the blacksmith. Beryl was grateful for the two girls' help, though Alucia seemed annoyed for some reason. Afterward, Beryl had a drink and reflected on his situation. He felt it was a humiliation that everything was being handed to him by his students. He wondered what Alutia expected from him, an old man. The next day marked Beryl's first day as an instructor. Alutia noticed his confusion and reassured him. She then led him to the training hall where the knights practiced. Beryl watched the knights sparring with each other. Feeling anxious about the intensity of the mock battles, Alutia introduced Beryl as the new instructor. But some of the knights were skeptical, doubting what they could possibly learn from a middle-aged man who only taught children. Beryl could feel the hostility in their gazes. Just then a familiar face appeared. It was Kuruni, another one of his former students. She was asked why she still felt she didn't know much despite being an official knight. She replied that she still had much to learn. She was overjoyed to see Beryl again and was proud to be trained by him once more. Hearing this, Beryl was moved and couldn't hold back his tears, which worried Alutia and Kuruni. But Beryl reassured them that he was fine, just emotional seeing how much his students had grown. Alutia reminded Kuruni to focus during training. Beryl felt he needed to try harder. He couldn't just rely on his students forever. At that moment, a knight approached them, introducing himself as Hembrits Drought, the vice commander. Beryl recognized him as the knight who had been in the intense sparring session earlier. With the same cold, murderous glare from yesterday, he questioned Beryl's abilities and challenged him to a duel to see if he was truly capable of instructing the knights. Tension filled the room as Hembrits awaited Beryl's response. Alutia, however, eagerly awaited the moment Beryl would showcase his swordsmanship. The Liberio Knights, renowned as the strongest in the kingdom, were a prestigious group with a rigorous training regimen. One knight from their order was said to be as strong as 10 from other kingdoms. Beryl, facing the vice commander Hembrits, a top swordsman in the kingdom, felt the pressure mounting. Refusing the match wasn't an option, as that would only deepen the suspicion surrounding him. Losing the fight would be a humiliation, and the worst outcome would be Alutia having to resign because of him. He looked to Alutia for help, but she seemed intrigued, seeing this as the perfect opportunity for the knights to learn from Beryl. As the match was about to begin, people gathered around, curious about the commotion. They knew Hembrits was going to duel the new instructor. Beryl realized there was no turning back. Kuruni, one of his former students, was worried about the situation. She exclaimed that Hembrits possessed inhuman strength, having once killed a mad bull with a single swing of a wooden club. Despite this, Alutia reassured her and told her to watch closely. Conversely, Hembrits had his own doubts about Beryl. He was expecting the legendary swordmaster of the Blackwater Holy Sword, but was disappointed to see a middle-aged man who seemed to lack any vitality. He suspected that Alutia, out of a sense of duty, might have nominated Beryl due to their past relationship. Hembrits was determined to expose any deception. Beryl braced himself as he felt an intense bloodlust from his opponent. The match began with Hembrits lunging at Beryl. Despite the vice commander's ferocious attack, Beryl remained perfectly calm. To everyone's astonishment, Hembrits found himself on his knees, with Beryl's wooden stick held to his neck, leaving the audience stunned. They couldn't even see Beryl's move because it was so fast. Kuruni was bewildered by the swift outcome. Alutia explained that Hembrits' initial attack was just a feint. He aimed for Beryl's neck, but then switched to a horizontal slash at Beryl's torso. Beryl parried the attack, causing Hembrits to lose his balance. Beryl parried the attack, throwing Hembrits off balance, then quickly repositioned to place the wooden sword at Hembrits' neck. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Hembrits tried to attack again, but was knocked back by Beryl, followed by a swift counterattack that struck Hembrits in the face. Beryl quickly apologized for hitting him so hard. Hembrits was astonished by Beryl's ability and wondered just how much Beryl could perceive during a fight. Alutia admired Beryl's unparalleled strength. It was all thanks to his vision. He could identify the smallest openings in an opponent's defense, from their breathing, gaze, posture, center of gravity, to the way they held their sword. This was a skill honed to perfection, earning his technique the name All-Seeing Eye Sword. Despite being defeated repeatedly, Hembrits refused to give up and continued to attack. He decided to use a special technique that even Alutia had struggled with. This technique made his hands a blur, making it difficult for his opponent to perceive the true distance. One of his hands gripped the back of the hilt until his lead foot completed the disengaging jump. His sword, accelerated by Herculean strength and centrifugal force, would completely shatter his opponent's defense. Or so he thought. Beryl dodged gracefully, then delivered a light tap to the back of Hembrits' head with his sword. Alutia and Kuruni were astonished by their master's display. Hembrits finally acknowledged Beryl's true skill, realizing that Beryl was truly no ordinary person. Alucia always defeated Hembrits in their matches, and he had a strange feeling each time. He felt as if they were always looking in different directions. He wondered why she had chosen to become a knight. As Alucia recalled this moment, the clash of swords pulled her back to reality. Beryl had pinned Hembrits to the ground with a powerful slash, while everyone applauded his brilliant swordsmanship, urging Alucia to end this one-sided match. Afterward, everyone decided to celebrate Beryl's appointment as their instructor. Kuruni raised her glass and they drank together. Beryl noticed that Alucia had now become a pretty good drinker, eating meat skewers and finishing a mug of beer. Alucia was a bit shy when she noticed Beryl looking at her. Beryl suggested ordering another round, making her even more flustered. Kuruni pointed out that Alucia has a high tolerance for alcohol, while Beryl couldn't believe that he was now drinking with his former students. He noticed his mug was empty, so Alucia tried to pour him another, but Hembrits beat her to it. He apologized for challenging Beryl earlier and thanked him for his guidance. Alucia felt unhappy about the interruption. After a while, Hembrits got a little drunk and began to express his admiration for Beryl. Beryl was somewhat surprised by Hembrits' change in personality. Alucia felt proud that Beryl's strength was finally being recognized. She then asked Beryl for his opinion on Hembrits. Beryl acknowledged his incredible strength, especially with that spinning slash. He explained that if someone could get behind Hembrits while attacking, they could evade and strike his blind spot. Hembrits was impressed with Beryl's quick analysis. A little drunk, he stood up and bowed to Beryl, expressing that the Knight Order desperately needed him. Beryl realized that even the strongest knights were still young and insecure about their futures. He resolved to take his role more seriously and work with them. Hembrits felt like he was in a dream, thrilled to see the legendary swordsman, the Blackwater Saint sword, with his own eyes. Beryl, flustered by this title, tried to deny it. But Kuruni chimed in, pointing out that Alucia was eating his meat skewers, leading to a light-hearted exchange. Later that night, Alucia sat on a bench, thinking about how she had acted in front of Beryl. She wondered if she had let her guard down too much, since everything was going according to her plan. She admired his extraordinary skill, recalling how his advice during the match with Hembrits had been incredibly accurate. She remembered a time when he had given her a sword as a parting gift, acknowledging that there was nothing more he could teach her. At the time, she felt he was still on a completely different level than her, and persuaded him to change his mind. Despite that, Beryl told her she was overestimating him, saying her skills were far beyond that of a countryside dojo. In her mind, he was far too talented for a place like that. From that day on, all her actions followed her plan, her life's goal. She took the knight selection exam at a young age, defeating everyone in her path, from young prodigies to the strongest instructors of the Knight Order. But after all that, no one could compare to her master. After establishing herself as a successful knight, right after joining the order, she became the youngest commander ever to be appointed. Then she would be invited to become an instructor. That was the moment she had been waiting for. She mentioned someone more worthy than herself. The reason she became a knight was to prepare a worthy stage for her master. You might think she's being selfish for not having ambitions like the other knights, but the mere thought that no one would know of her master's swordsmanship was unbearable to her. Alucia stood up, determined that her master's swordsmanship was just beginning. He would build a new era, and in the near future, she hoped he would be rightfully called a swordmaster. Meanwhile, in his room, Beryl was regretting drinking too much again. A scene in a large library where two characters are talking about something. A girl asks another girl named Thistle if she's heard the news about Vice Commander Liberio being utterly defeated in a duel. Thistle replies that it's the first she's hearing of it. The girl reveals that it wasn't the commander who defeated him, but a new instructor known as something like the Black... something or other. Thistle corrects her, clearly familiar with Beryl. Meanwhile, in the town's commercial district, Kuruni is showing Beryl around the western side of town, which is bustling with shops and pedestrians. Fights often break out in this bustling area, so knights patrol the area 24/7 to maintain order. Beryl feels a bit out of place, but Kuruni is thrilled to be showing him around the area. How did the two of them end up together? Well, after training had finished, Kuruni had asked if he was used to the city yet, and Beryl admitted that he hadn't explored much beyond the training hall. Hembrits mentioned that there were many famous spots in Valtrane, and Kuruni offered to take Beryl on a tour during her patrol duty, which is how they ended up together. Kuruni cheerfully leads Beryl through the bustling market, while Beryl feels overwhelmed by the number of shops and doesn't know where to look. He feels like he's getting too old for this kind of thing. Suddenly, someone recognizes him. which is strange since he hardly knows anyone other than his students. He's confused until Kuruni casually calls out her name, making her an acquaintance. He starts to notice something familiar about her, especially her sword, and finally realizes it's Thistle. Thistle takes off her hood and cheerfully complains about not being recognized sooner. Beryl recalls that Thistle used to be a quiet girl who would often practice her swings by herself in the dojo. After mastering all of his sword teachings, she received her farewell sword and left the dojo immediately, saying she had things to do. Kuruni invites Thistle to join their tour and she agrees, happy to see them again after a while. Beryl is curious about Thistle. And Kuruni proudly reveals that Thistle is the vice captain of the magic division. He is shocked to hear that she can use magic. The magic division is an organization composed entirely of mages, a rare profession in this world. Along with the Librio Knights, it forms the kingdom's power structure. He never imagined Thistle would become a part of them, rather than pursuing the way of the sword. Still, he's taught another amazing kid. Thistle then explains the concept of magic equipment, showing Beryl various accessories imbued with magic. Beryl and Kuruni are fascinated by the variety of magical accessories, until Thistle points out a cursed earring that he ultimately decides to buy. After leaving the shop, they are both worried and intrigued by how easily Thistle handles the cursed earring. She reassures them that it's fine as long as no one wears it and all the conditions are met. She explains that cursed items are created mainly out of hatred, bloodlust, or even as propaganda to tarnish the image of mages. Afterward, Thistle gives Beryl a bracelet to help him sleep better and ease his fatigue from training. Beryl is touched by the gesture and impressed with Thistle's accomplishments as a maid, even though he won't get to witness her sword technique anymore. However, their peaceful stroll is interrupted by a scream for help from a woman being attacked by robbers. He is about to act, but Thistle volunteers. She drew her sword, combining it with her magic, and defeated the robber with a flying slash. Beryl couldn't help but be amazed by Thistle's display of magic. The remaining robber quickly ran into a narrow alley. But Thistle was in no hurry. With a sudden burst, she leaped over the structures and caught up to the robber, taking him down with another slash, after incapacitating them. Kuruni took over, hauling them away, leaving Beryl to wonder at the extraordinary strength of each knight. Meanwhile, Thistle was waiting beside Beryl, expecting praise. She explained that what she did was a form of sword magic, enhancing her blade with spells. She proudly declared that she was the strongest in her division when it came to that technique. Beryl was amazed at how she applied magic to the sword techniques he had taught her, and it made him want to meet the person who had taught her magic. Thistle laughed and explained that her division commander had taught her this unique skill. She mentioned that both he and her commander said similar things, which made them quite alike. After parting ways with Thistle, Beryl felt great about his role, thanks to the bracelet he had received. He was starting to feel proud of his student's growth. Realizing something, he suddenly slapped his own cheek. Reminding himself not to get arrogant, he hadn't accomplished anything yet. While he was lost in thought, a fireball suddenly appeared in front of him, quickly taking on a human form. The figure lunged at him, and Beryl easily blocked it while lunging, and to slash at its neck. The figure stood still as if nothing had happened, and he quickly realized he was facing a different kind of magic. A mysterious figure watched him from the shadows. A fire doll created from magic. He realized that no matter how many times he slashed it, the flames would simply regenerate. Deciding on a different approach, he started to run, causing the fire doll to chase after him. Beryl recalled what Thistle had told him about fighting magic users. Long-range magic wasn't very efficient because it consumed a lot of energy and power. After a while, he decided to wait in an open area. He figured the fire spirit's controller had to be nearby, and in a place like this, there would be nowhere to hide. His hunch was right as a girl suddenly appeared, apparently the fire doll's controller, speaking in a strange way. She seemed amused and also a little annoyed that he had forced her out of hiding. Beryl was surprised, not expecting a child to appear. The girl, looking offended, retorted that she wasn't a child and questioned his respect for his elders. She was clearly familiar with him, as someone known as the Blackwater Holy Sword. Considering Beryl had escaped her spell, she wasn't surprised to learn he had defeated the Roaring Blade, which turned out to be Hembritz's nickname. In any case, she declared that she was here to take his life. Beryl, confused, tried to assess the situation, realizing she was powerful, but something felt off. Suddenly, he noticed a bracelet on the girl's wrist, identical to the one Thistle had worn. The girl admitted to stealing it from an interesting sword-wielding mage. Beryl grew serious, demanding that she reveal Thistle's whereabouts. The girl taunted him back, challenging him to make her talk if he wanted to know. She immediately summoned countless flaming swords around herself and launched them at Beryl. He swiftly dodged every attack, then noticed a giant mass of ice forming in the sky. He braced for the attack, slicing it in two. The girl seized the opportunity to fire a lightning spell at Beryl's position. Confident that she'd hit him from a blind spot, she was surprised to see him completely unharmed. The girl laughed, finding the situation amusing, and resumed her massive assault. Beryl realized it was impossible to get close to her due to the sheer volume of spells. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever, but at the same time, if he kept pressuring her, she'd have to keep casting spells, which would eventually wear her out. After all, magic has its limits, so this would be a battle of who ran out of steam first. The girl continued her assault, this time summoning a water puppet, flooding the entire platform with water. Beryl found himself in a tough spot. She then froze the water, ensuring he wouldn't be able to dodge this time. While preparing her magic, she compressed the fire puppet into a small sphere of magic and hurled it toward the ice platform, resulting in a massive explosion. This phenomenon occurs when water makes direct contact with an object at an extremely high temperature. It instantly boils and then explodes, causing a hydrothermal explosion. Caught up in the heat of the moment, the girl quickly realized she might have overdone it. What she didn't expect was for Beryl to emerge from the smoke, having just barely escaped Model by creating a shield from the ground. The girl smirked at him, and he quickly dove aside as he sensed an attack. Beryl wondered why she didn't keep up the pressure, because if she had, he would have been done for right then and there. The girl, growing tired of the situation, admitted that she couldn't do anything more, given that he could read the situation so well as to mention Fissel's name. Beryl was confused and asked her how she knew Fissel. The girl exclaimed that she actually knew her very well, as she was the one who taught Fissel magic. None other than the commander of the magic division, Lucy Diamond, also the strongest mage in the kingdom. Lucy smiled when she saw Beryl's stunned reaction. A spell so dangerous that even using it in practice was forbidden. Lucy Diamond had expected that, but she was still sad that her magic would never be made public. Back in the present, Beryl looked unhappy as Lucy casually revealed that she had heard about him from Fissel. She wanted to test her student's judgment, confirming that someone could indeed stand up to her spells. Beryl wondered why she had to lie, and she explained that she thought he wouldn't take it seriously if she hadn't. She apologized for it, saying she wanted to look cool in front of Fissel for once in her life. Suddenly, they heard voices echoing and realized they needed to get out of there quickly. Lucy urged Beryl to hurry up. He was confused by the situation, wondering why they had to run away from the mess she had created. The next day, back at the Knights training hall, Beryl found Fissel in the hallway. They greeted each other, and he thanked her for the bracelet she had given him. Fissel explained that she came to deliver potions made by the magic division to the Knights. Beryl was surprised to learn that mages were responsible for making these potions. He offered to help her carry them, but didn't expect them to be so heavy. Fissel made it look easy by using her magic. As they walked, he told her about what happened last night, confirming that Lucy, who looked like a child, was indeed the commander of the magic division. She explained that Lucy used magic to stop her body from aging, making her true age a mystery. Despite her appearance, Lucy is the strongest mage in existence, versed in every type of magic on the continent. She is the embodiment of a living magical weapon, monitored by the state. Beryl felt lucky to have survived his encounter with her, and figured he wouldn't be seeing her again anytime soon, leading Fissel to Alucia's office. His hopes were quickly shattered when they were greeted by the presence of 3 women. Lucy, the commander of the magic division, Alucia, the commander of the Liberio Knights, and Slena, a black rank adventurer. Beryl felt nervous facing this powerful lineup. Lucy mentioned that they had been talking about him and invited him to sit next to her. He immediately refused while Slena and Alucia recognized the familiar banter between the two. He wondered about the reason for this meeting, when Slena raised her hand, asking him for a favor. She wanted his help in training a group of young adventurers who had taken on a quest to conquer a dungeon. She explained that the newbies needed to be accompanied by a platinum rank adventurer or higher, but they didn't have enough personnel besides herself. Alucia chimed in, pointing out that Slena had mentioned earlier that she was capable enough. Slena admitted that was usually true, but countered that there were unexpected situations, like encountering unidentified monsters. Lucy added that there was also a request sent to the Ministry of Magic to investigate that dungeon, because mysterious magical power was leaking out. Although the probability of an accident is very low to be safe, The guild has decided that at least 2 veterans should go along. Selena declared that she and Beryl would be enough. Beryl immediately agreed to help, and asked Alutia if it was okay to leave the training area open while he was away. Alutia reassured him that it was fine, and Selena thanked Beryl enthusiastically. They agreed to meet at the guild hall later. Meanwhile, Lucy told Thistle that they should go along because things might get interesting. After the discussion, Beryl and Alutia walked through the hallway. She said she didn't expect him to agree to help. Beryl explained that his confidence had been restored thanks to her, after she had asked him to become a trainer, which made her very happy. She wished him to be careful and have a safe trip. Adventurers, individuals affiliated with the Adventurers Guild with authority that transcends all national borders, is a dream job, taking requests from the guild and adventuring around the world. Requests can vary from finding lost items to exterminating monsters. Adventurers are ranked based on their strength and skills. Depending on their rank, they may have to accept more requests with stricter conditions and the highest rank. The black rank can decide the continued existence of a nation. 20 years ago, Beryl had picked Selena up after she washed ashore on a riverbank, the sole survivor of a monster attack. She was terrified of him at first, unable to even remember her own name. But one time, he noticed her peeking at his sword practice. He asked her if she wanted to hold a sword, and in that very moment she started to speak, stating her name was Selena. After hearing that, he couldn't hold back his tears. Walking to the Adventurers Guild with her, Selena was no longer that scared little girl. He couldn't let her take care of his place every time. At the Guildmaster's office, Beryl and Selena were greeted by Nidus, the Liberio branch master, and his assistant Maigan, who shot a sharp glare at him. Maigan confirmed his identity, and immediately expressed concern about letting an outsider join their dungeon expedition. He doubted Beryl's abilities, even with recommendations from Selena and Lucy. Beryl felt a sense of tension hearing Maigan doubt his abilities. Maigan explained that he was only worried for Beryl's safety, and that it would tarnish the guild's image if an outsider died in the dungeon. He politely asked Beryl about his dungeon exploration experience. Beryl recalled his past, confirming that he had experience, but admitted to having fled a dungeon without defeating a single monster. And ever since then, he had always felt afraid. This confession did not please Maigan, who doubted Beryl's ability to keep the young adventurers safe. Selena defended Beryl, asserting that he was not someone who would die easily. Lucy suggested that if Beryl could demonstrate strength worthy of a platinum or even a black rank, there would be no complaints. The guildmaster joined the discussion, realizing what Lucy had been implying. What followed was the bustling excitement of the crowd. Bets were placed, and the audience eagerly awaited the battle between the twin dragon sword Selena and the mysterious man. Beryl felt annoyed at how Lucy had set things up, and prepared himself with no other choice. Selena, on the other hand, was delighted at the chance to fight, as her old master watched from the side. Thistle brought drinks for everyone. Maigan questioned Lucy if this was her plan from the start, but Lucy denied any such intention. Nidus pointed out that Lucy always has a clever plan. Regardless, Maigan just wanted to test Beryl's strength, and wondered how he would fare against a black-ranked adventurer. The highest rank an adventurer could achieve was the ocean rank. Many joined the guild with the flames of ambition burning in their hearts. But no one aimed for the black rank, because to achieve this rank meant to no longer be human. Back at the match between Beryl and Selena, the crowd was buzzing with excitement and placing bets. Some were skeptical of Beryl's chances, while others cheered him on. Beryl tried to focus, unable to help but compare Selena to all his previous training partners. Whether it was Karuni, who was just out of town, or Alutia, who was too busy to come train. There was no mistaking it. Selena was on a completely different level than anyone he had ever fought. Lucy smiled excitedly as the match began. Selena struck first with incredible speed, and Beryl barely managed to parry. He dodged the next attack and tried to anticipate her movements, but Selena didn't give him enough time, continuing to launch a barrage of attacks, each one more powerful than the last. Everyone watched them in awe and excitement. While Maigan remarked that Selena was no ordinary dual-wielding swordswoman, he recalled a few years ago when a dragon appeared from the west of Liberio. It was a remote place, far from the knight's jurisdiction. Therefore, the Adventurers Guild declared an emergency subjugation quest for all available adventurers in the area. Surprisingly, the dragon had the ability to regenerate, a new species that was later named the Immortal Dragon. All the ocean-ranked adventurers failed to defeat it, and the fear of widespread destruction loomed. The one who put an end to the disaster was none other than Selena, who was platinum-ranked at the time. She managed to damage it far beyond its ability to regenerate and finally destroyed it. This was all possible thanks to her greatest weapon, her unparalleled stamina. In exchange for her broken sword, 2 swords made from the dragon's gem were forged, earning her the nickname Twin Dragon Swords. Beryl felt overwhelmed by Selena's relentless attacks. He could only defend, unable to find an opening to counterattack. Maigan wondered if Selena was holding back, but Lucy and Thistle both believed she was fighting at her full potential. The crowd grew anxious as the fight intensified, with some suggesting it be stopped, while others said Beryl could surely hold his own. Meanwhile, Selena was amazed at her master's ability to withstand her attacks, mentioning that Alucia was the last one who could do so. In her heart, she secretly hoped that he wouldn't fall and lose. The only thing she wanted was for him to always be far ahead of her. Drenched in sweat, Beryl succeeded in disarming one of Selena's swords, sending it flying into the air. Thistle recognized the move as Leaf Crush, a disarming technique she had perfected to an exceptional degree. Though she was reluctant to use it, it broke an opponent's stance while disarming them at the same time. With her one remaining sword, Selena blocked Beryl's attack. Beryl maintained the pressure and quickly freed his right hand to catch Selena's sword as it was knocked away. With no way left to defend herself, he pinned her to the ground with the wooden sword at her neck, signaling the end of the match. Everyone fell silent for a moment. While Beryl praised Selena for the strength she had gained, she humbly replied that she was still a long way from being good enough. And the crowd burst into applause, especially those who had bet on him. Maigan stood up, saying he would call the new recruits over to introduce Beryl to them. Lucy and Thistle were impressed by the match, and Thistle was asked for her opinion. She noted that although Selena was a dual-wielding swordswoman, she was predominantly right-handed and used her left for control. She admired how Beryl had targeted the large swings from Selena's weaker hand. After hearing the clear explanation, Lucy was delighted with her student's keen observation. Thistle asked why Lucy had arranged the match, and Lucy explained that it wasn't that she disliked it. It wasn't Beryl, but the fact that he didn't act in a way that was worthy of his strength. During the match a few days ago, she was shocked to see him treat his own skills so lightly. For him, it wasn't about winning or losing, but just a feeling of not accomplishing anything. She exclaimed that it was a waste to let someone as talented as him do nothing. Becoming a renowned instructor wasn't enough. She wanted his name to be widely known, helping those who needed his skills. Thistle strongly agreed, but wondered about the hostage situation she had heard about, which had caught her by surprise when she returned from the hall. Maigan led Beryl to the new recruits, preparing for the upcoming dungeon expedition. Beryl and his group boarded a carriage, heading for a dungeon. During the journey, the conversation turned to Landred, who had taken over Beryl's dojo. Beryl reflected on Landred's decision, realizing that although he had the talent to aim for ocean rank, he wasn't the type to travel. The rookies expressed their gratitude for Landred's past guidance, and Beryl mentioned that Landred would be delighted if they visited. Even so, his old man would probably just chase him away. Thinking about this, Beryl was surprised they had managed to connect so well. The party assigned to them included Porta, a bronze rank, and Needly, a shy girl who was also a bronze rank, along with Salikat's, a confident silver rank. They were thrilled to meet Beryl and Selena, especially after witnessing their impressive fight. Porta, in particular, was way too excited during their first meeting. Maigan informed them about an unidentified monster, as there were no records of its tracks. Adventurers were searching in various locations, including the dungeon they were heading to in the Azaramia forest to the south, known as Greenwar. He warned them to prioritize their safety and to return if necessary. Upon reaching the dungeon, Selena and Beryl planned to stay in the rear, ensuring the rookies could learn on their own, while also providing them with guidance. Beryl reminded himself that he was no longer the man who had run away in the past. Now was his time to protect the young adventurers. As they moved deeper into the dungeon, Beryl stumbled and felt a deep sense of shame when Selena asked if he was okay. Porta comforted him, telling him to slow down, and signaled to Salikat's, who scanned the surroundings with a magic tool called a gathering ring, a tool that glows when many living creatures are gathered around the wearer. Salikat's, in his role as the scout, would ensure their safety by detecting monsters as early as possible. With Porta and Needly, they formed the most basic 3-person formation. Suddenly, Salikat stopped as he sensed multiple living creatures' aid. The group had discovered some goblins, and Beryl noticed something in the background. Everyone was shocked to realize that these goblins were engaging in cannibalism. The 3 discussed their plan and decided they needed to eliminate these goblins instead of avoiding them. Porter urged them to use their usual formation, and Isekai'd initiated the attack with throwing knives. Striking one of the enemies in the head, they celebrated their first victory. While Beryl watched them anxiously, worried for their safety, Selena reassured Beryl that they were fine, and he noticed their good coordination. Porta would draw the enemy's attention while Needly supported him. In case of attacks from his blind spots, Isekai'd was in charge of finishing them off, being a higher rank than the other two. As Needly thanked him for his support, they failed to notice a goblin preparing to attack from above. This was when Selena intervened, reminding them that even though goblins are weak, they are still cunning monsters. They had noticed the goblins' malnourished bodies, which explained their cannibalistic behavior. Selena asked Porta for his opinion. He thought for a moment and deduced that the goblins had resorted to cannibalism due to a food shortage caused by their large numbers. The reason they weren't hunting was because a large monster was preying on them outside, possibly the unidentified monster they were looking for. Beryl was amazed that Porta could deduce so much just from observing the goblins. Realizing the danger of the situation, Selena and Beryl decided to end the investigation and report to the guild. Selena praised the rookies, especially Porta's decision-making and leadership skills, while Beryl admired the team's seamless coordination and their understanding of the dangers they faced. They didn't hesitate to kill the monsters, which was much better than what he had done in the past. As he thought about his own disappointing past, Needly noticed Porta's wound. He told her it was nothing, but she insisted on treating it, creating an intimate moment between them. Beryl watched their interaction without needing an invitation. Isekai'd commented that they were always like this. So close, yet they don't realize it, with Needly being too shy and Porta too dense. Their conversation was interrupted by Selena, and Isekai'd immediately apologized, thinking he was about to be scolded. To his surprise, Selena wanted to hear their story too. After learning about the situation, Selena suggested they help the two of them after this mission, but Isekai'd wasn't so sure given Porta's behavior. He was surprised to learn that Selena was also interested in such topics. After a while, they decided to leave the dungeon, and for some reason, the awkward atmosphere between Selena and Beryl lingered, leaving the rookies feeling confused. At the cave entrance, the group declared the surrounding area safe after checking for monsters, so they started heading into the forest. Suddenly, Beryl sensed something from both sides. Selena turned to Isekai'd, asking him to use his ring, but there was no reaction. Beryl still felt that something was wrong. He was sure he had seen a huge shadow. When he sensed that shadow was high above, he immediately warned everyone of an attack coming from above, while Selena rushed to help the rookies. Just a second too late, Porta was hit by the monster, sending him flying, unconscious and heavily injured. They looked towards the monster that had attacked them, a creature with the upper body of a bird and the lower body of a lion, a griffin. Selena ordered everyone to stand still, realizing that of all the griffins, this was the one the guild had failed to exterminate. In the past, a monster named Xenograbel, individual monsters, considered difficult or impossible to kill, are given titles and special attention by the guild to prevent them from becoming living disasters. It's rare for a named monster to be killed. Right now, they were facing the special individual slaying griffin, named Formless Ascent Blazes. Beryl was worried about Porta's condition. They needed to act fast to save his life. Selena quickly charged towards the griffin. The monster tried to attack her, but she dodged by, sliding under its legs. Reaching Porta's side, she noticed he was still breathing, but he had deep wounds that needed immediate treatment. Meanwhile, the griffin roared in fury, ready to attack her. It stopped in its tracks as it dodged an attack from Beryl, seemingly staring right at him. Beryl told Selena to help Porta while he distracted the griffin. She refused at first, but relented after he pleaded with her. She carried Porta on her back and told Needly and Isekai'd to run for the carriage. The griffin began to move swiftly, preparing to strike, and breathed fire towards him. He recalled Lucy's words about some monsters possessing magical powers. He hid behind a burning tree and seized the opportunity while the griffin was distracted. He aimed for the griffin's neck as it noticed him, but it was too late as his blade struck the monster's body. A sudden flash of light blinded him, leaving him confused about what had just happened. When his vision returned, the shock on his face was undeniable as he discovered his sword had been broken. The griffin prepared to stomp on him, but he managed to dodge out of the way just in time. He realized his sword had been incinerated by the incredible heat radiating from the griffin. He considered his situation. Landing a finishing blow was impossible with a broken sword, and he couldn't outrun the griffin either. Regardless, he couldn't afford to die, as the griffin would certainly go after Selena and the others. This was a do-or-die situation. After entrusting Porta to Isekai'd's and Needly's care, she prepared for her next move. Selena immediately rushed back to Beryl, pouring a potion onto her injured hand. She felt guilty for putting him in danger and for being unable to protect Porta. She believed that if only she had been faster, they could have defeated the griffin together. She couldn't bear to be the one being protected again. She recalled a painful memory from her past. She was in a carriage with her parents, on their way to the next town, when suddenly their carriage was attacked. She saw her parents reaching out for her. It was the last time she ever saw them, as the carriage plunged off a cliff. She was the only survivor, and when she opened her eyes, she found herself in a strange room. Her parents were nowhere to be found. At that time, she was terrified of the strange man trying to talk to her. She refused to eat her food, but Beryl didn't give up. He stayed by her side no matter how tired he was. As the days went by, her condition grew worse, and Beryl decided to go get a doctor, even though there was a blizzard outside. In her feverish dream, Selena was always searching for her parents. She cried and begged them not to abandon her. She only stopped when she felt someone's warm hand. When she woke up, she found herself in a strange place again, frightened by the strangers. She suddenly felt the need to have someone by her side. Suddenly, she noticed someone sleeping beside her. She recognized him. The nurses explained that he had carried her here in the middle of a raging blizzard, and that he had begged them to save her. He was the reason she was still alive. After that, she finally decided to eat, making everyone happy. They spent a lot of time together until he sent her to an orphanage. She promised herself that one day, she would become someone like him. Someone who would stand up for people they didn't even know. Beryl leaped into the air, successfully injuring the griffin's eye. The monster shrieked in pain, grabbing Beryl's sheathed sword, and dragged him to the ground. He pulled out the broken sword and stabbed it into the griffin's other eye. Fire erupted from the monster's body, and he felt his hand burn. He was terrified by its power. It didn't even flinch despite being blind. The griffin pinned him to the ground, giving him no chance to escape. At least this way, it couldn't see and chase after Selena and the others. Finally, Beryl felt proud that he could do something, even someone like him. Just as the griffin was about to finish him off, Selena appeared on the scene, witnessing the griffin about to breathe fire. Beryl called her name, reaching out his hand. At the last moment, he managed to break free, severing the griffin's entire leg. The monster roared in agony. As he looked at the sword in his hand, the one Selena had given him. After dodging the griffin's attack, he looked back and saw it looked tired, probably from overusing its heat armor. He realized that not every part of its body was protected, and those unprotected spots were its weak points, its neck, its left limbs, and both wings. He told Selena their swords could cut through those parts. She understood, and they both attacked at the same time, dodging the fireballs from the griffin. The ground around them erupted in flames, but it didn't matter, because they had both successfully sliced through its body. They were both silently proud of each other's skill. Though injured, the griffin still managed to fly up and prepare another spell, realizing it planned to scorch the entire area in a single attack. Beryl threw his sword into the air, which Selena skillfully caught. Her other sword, which was tied to a rope, had pierced through the griffin's head, allowing her to get in close and deliver the finishing blow, displaying skills worthy of her title, Twin Dragon Sword. The griffin crashed to the ground with Selena, who landed safely on top of its body. She let out a sigh of relief, but immediately got to her feet, worried about her master. Suddenly, Beryl emerged from the smoke, grabbing her by the shoulders, clearly frantic as he checked her for injuries. Selena reassured him that she was fine, and pointed to his burned hand. He'd been so worried about her that he'd completely forgotten his own injury. Selena smiled as he apologized and asked if there were any potions left. His hand was trembling in pain. Later, at the guild hall, Porta apologized for causing so much trouble, but Beryl reassured him that it was no big deal. Selena praised Porta for his courage, stressing that just surviving an encounter with a named monster was a huge achievement. Just then, Manga walked in, asking about Porta's condition, and also thanked Beryl for taking down Zeno Greybull all by himself. Before Beryl could clear up the misunderstanding, someone burst through the door telling Maigan he was needed downstairs immediately. He immediately excused himself, leaving everyone to wonder what was happening outside. Downstairs, there was a huge commotion as people organized the recovery of the griffin's carcass. Selena explained to Beryl that guild operations involved coordinating personnel and supplies. When a named monster is defeated, the recovery process attracts merchants, scholars, and mages, which makes the caravan larger and requires more escorts. They also have to notify other guilds about it. All in all, taking down a named monster is a massive undertaking. After a while, Selena excused herself to change, leaving Beryl by himself. Feeling out of place in the busy atmosphere, his thoughts were interrupted by a loud voice from a woman, urging everyone to get up and help with the recovery process. She unexpectedly asked Beryl to carry some items, making sure no one was slacking off. After changing, Selena was surprised to see Beryl working and quickly corrected the situation, reminding everyone that Beryl was the one who defeated Xeno'Grable. Beryl, as usual, humbly insisted that Selena was the one who took down the monster. Meanwhile, upstairs, Porta turned to Isekai'd to chat. He compared Beryl to Landred, a man famous for letting others take credit for his achievements, which was why he never reached the ocean rank. Porta admitted that he was initially scared of Beryl, but after getting to know him, he realized Beryl was just an ordinary, kind old man. When he shook Beryl's hand that one time, he noticed his hands were as calloused as stone. Porta wondered what could have made his hands like that. He told himself that fame and achievements shouldn't be his motivation for getting stronger. Hearing this, Isekai'd decided to claim his own achievements, turning it into a lighthearted conversation. Later, Selena and Beryl sat down for a meal. Beryl felt a little guilty for resting, but Selena insisted it was well-deserved. They talked about when Selena left the dojo 20 years ago. She mentioned she'd had a good, normal life and that her adoptive parents treated her very well. Beryl was happy to hear that, but Selena apologized. She expressed her regret for not visiting even once since she left the dojo, and felt she had been selfish all this time. Beryl comforted her, saying that just seeing her living well and helping others was enough. He encouraged her to visit whenever she wanted, knowing his parents would also be happy to see her. Hearing this, Selena tried to hide her emotions, unable to hold back her tears. It became a heartwarming moment. Watching from the side, Manga noticed they looked like a father and daughter enjoying their time together. A blacksmith was working on a sword when he noticed someone standing behind him. It was Selena, whom he hadn't seen in a long time, asking Bardell, the blacksmith, for a favor. Meanwhile, at the knight's headquarters, Alucia was clearly not in a good mood. Walking beside her, Beryl wondered if she was angry for having called him over, and asked about his injuries. He reassured her that he was mostly fine, and it wouldn't affect the knight's training, thanks to medicine from the Ministry of Magic. Alucia felt relieved, but then grew worried about the others who were injured. Beryl mentioned that both the rookie and Selena were injured, though Selena's injuries were minor, which surprised Alucia. Beryl smiled when he saw Alucia's relieved expression. Suddenly, Alucia voiced her frustration, insisting that Xeno'Grable's ability was a tough challenge for a swordsman, and added that it was the first time he'd encountered someone like that. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been injured. Beryl was surprised to see her so angry about his injury from the day before. He couldn't believe it when he first heard her. At the training hall, Evans Jean and Kuruni Kruthiel were ready for their fourth match. When the signal was given, Kuruni rushed forward so quickly that Evans barely managed to block her attack. The spectators were amazed to see Evans get knocked back, and another added that Kuruni was probably on the same level as Hembritz. Beryl felt proud hearing this and thought about Kuruni's strength. Getting caught in close-quarters combat meant having no chance to counterattack. However, Evans kept his distance, dodging her series of slashes, and countered with a blow to Kuruni's right side. The match was stopped, and Evans celebrated his third victory while also taunting her. Kuruni gritted her teeth in anger and started doing push-ups as a penalty, while Hembritz and the others watched the scene in silence. Some of the others commented on how she was always full of energy. Beryl told Kuruni she did well and asked if she was okay. She reassured him that she was fine, just that her stomach was a little stiff. But Beryl replied that her stomach wasn't the problem. He admitted that she didn't look okay to him. Hembritz and the others watched their interaction, and Kuruni decided to run off. Finally, she admitted to Beryl that she was feeling down about her recent losing streak. He was surprised and asked her what she meant. Kuruni cried out that it was due to a lack of training, or at least that's what she thought. She said that everyone had probably gotten used to her fighting style, which was usually to stick close to her opponent while waiting for the right moment to strike. However, if her opponent kept their distance, it only put her at a disadvantage because of her modest height. At that point, she couldn't think of any way to turn things around. Beryl acknowledged that she was aware of her own weakness and praised her, explaining that she was so strong at close range that everyone had to come up with countermeasures against her. But at the same time, it also meant that it was getting harder to consistently defeat a Liberio knight, and fighting an incompatible opponent could get her killed in a real battle. Kuruni pondered his words, and he asked if she wanted to go with him for a bit. He led her to a blacksmith's shop, and as it turned out, Kuruni was already familiar with this place. She explained that she'd been here before, sent by Selena when her sword broke. She cheerfully encouraged him to go inside. Stepping inside, Beryl was taken aback by how the shop was filled with swords. And they heard a commotion at the counter. A customer was demanding a weapon but had no money, claiming he needed it to get ingredients for his wife's medicine. Unexpectedly, the smith cried out, sympathizing with the man's situation without a hint of doubt. Bardel was stunned. The kind-hearted smith offered the man his pick of any weapon he liked. While the man secretly rejoiced at Bardel's gullibility, Kuruni stepped in, introducing herself as a Liberio knight. Bardel, who it turned out knew her, greeted her cheerfully while the man was clearly displeased. After sending the man on his way, she warned Bardel about being so easily fooled and naive, which stunned the smith. Just then, Beryl walked in and greeted Bardel. Delighted to see him after so long, Bardel was taken by surprise and overjoyed to see Beryl and Valtrain. Bardel used to train at the dojo with Fissel and Kuruni, believing that to forge a sword, he first had to understand what it meant to be a swordsman. Without any shame, Bardel had asked Beryl, who was younger than him, to teach him alongside the other students. Beryl still remembered the sight of him swinging a sword with the other kids. As she continued her lecture, Kuruni warned Bardel that the man just wanted a free sword to resell. But Bardel just smiled, pleased that the story about the sick wife was a lie, and a little proud that his swords were valuable enough for someone to lie for. Beryl smiled as he watched them interact, remembering Bardel's earnestness, same as always. He expressed his admiration for the swords in Bardel's shop, and Bardel wholeheartedly agreed, proud of his work. He pointed to a two-handed sword called a Zweihander, asking Bardel if he thought he should change his sword. Beryl replied that it was for Kuruni, and wondered aloud if it would have been suitable on the way here. He had already spoken to Kuruni about changing her sword. He told her that if she wanted to make up for her lack of reach, she should use a longer weapon. Since she was used to fighting with a sword, he suggested she switch to a two-hander. Kuruni was hesitant at first, worried it would hinder her close-quarters combat ability. Beryl assured her that she could still fight well with the new sword, and that he thought it was perfect for her. Bardel was intrigued but wondered if such a drastic change from a one-handed to a two-handed sword would really suit Kuruni. So they decided to test it out. Beryl stood in front of her, just out of reach of her usual short sword. Bardel was worried for Kuruni, but Beryl reassured him that she was fine, and that this was just one of the options she could choose. And he believed she would be able to find the right answer for herself. She nervously gripped the two-handed sword. Kuruni took a fighting stance. And in that instant, something just clicked in her mind. Amazed and delighted, she called out his name, swinging the sword that was as tall as she was. She expressed her excitement, saying that she finally understood, and would immediately buy this sword. Bardel explained that he needed to adjust it first, and said he also had some other business with Beryl. He mentioned that Selena had visited the day before and had complained about Beryl for refusing to take credit and rewards for defeating the unnamed monster. Bardel urged him to accept those things properly, as it was also for the guild's reputation. He revealed that Selena had left something for him, the claw of the monster named Zeno Grable, and that he would make a sword for him from it. Beryl felt stunned as he recalled the day they defeated Zeno Grable. Beryl had been amazed at how Selena's broken sword had repaired itself. She had explained that her blade was enchanted with the regenerative ability of an immortal dragon, allowing it to recover from almost any damage. She had encouraged the use of weapons with monster abilities, and wondered what kind of sword would be created from Beryl's Zeno Grable material. Back in the present, Bardel asked Kuruni to give him her hand to measure the perfect fit for her sword. While Beryl covered his eyes, nervously wondering what would happen, Kuruni clenched her fist with all her might, and Bardel felt a bull-like strength from her. He commented on her improved strength, calling her Muscle Girl. He also noted that with the size of her hands and the length of her arms, adjustments were needed for the sword's guard and blade. He also pointed out a wound on Kuruni's side, which she explained was from training. Beryl was surprised that Bardel could tell so much just from a handshake. Kuruni explained Bardel's skill and his ability to sense the hidden talents of knights and the quality of blades. Bardel humbly shrugged and gave Kuruni the price list. She was confused by the cheap price, but Bardel explained that it was just a prototype to get used to before making the real sword. Kuruni thanked him, while Beryl was surprised by the price, realizing that the finances of the Lebrio Knights were not to be underestimated. Bardel encouraged Kuruni to try the sword outside, and asked Beryl if he was ready to accept the Zeno Grable sword. The last time he talked about it, he was so excited about making a sword from a named monster, and asked Beryl what kind of sword he wanted. Contrary to his expectations, Beryl had flatly refused, saying it was impossible even though Selena had already paid for it. To this day, Bartle still couldn't figure out why Beryl had refused. He shook Beryl's body lightly, trying to persuade him, but Beryl stubbornly refused, saying that Selena was the one who defeated it. Bardell, with excitement and emotion, begged Beryl to accept the sword, saying that he was always thinking of him. He recalled the first time he saw Beryl's skills firsthand when he was his apprentice. Beryl had successfully sliced the scarecrow in two, so he asked if he could see the sword Beryl had used. It was still in good condition, but wasn't a high-end item. At that moment, Beryl had realized something about himself. Bardell reminded Beryl that Zeno Grable had likely incinerated his old sword with its immense heat, saying that if he could get a sword with that ability, he would become much stronger. Bardell didn't know what else to say. Then, Bardell promised to forge a sword that in the future would go down in legend and didn't want anyone other than Beryl to wield it. Beryl, moved by Bardell's passion, had no choice but to agree. He decided to accept the sword and promised not to sell it, which made Bardell very happy. Bardell asked for a handshake. And as soon as Beryl touched his hand, he felt Bardell's terrifying power, picturing a giant monster with many limbs and eyes sending a shiver of fear down his spine. Beryl asked what was wrong, but Bardell just brushed it off. After a while, Beryl and Kuruni left the shop, planning to return together when both swords were ready. Bardell was left alone and chuckled to himself about what he had just said. He realized he wasn't making a sword for Beryl to become stronger. In fact, he had no choice but to forge something worthy of Beryl's power, calling him a Leviathan. Meanwhile, after leaving Bardell's shop, Beryl went to collect his first salary as a night instructor. The amount felt overwhelming, especially since Alucia had mentioned it was less than usual because he didn't want to accept more. Beryl felt uneasy carrying so much money around in Valtranis, but even so, it wasn't enough to buy the Zeno Grable sword. He couldn't compare himself to Selena, who had paid for it so easily. Lost in thought, he decided to take a less crowded path. A cloaked figure, hiding in a corner, was watching him. After a moment, he noticed himself constantly checking his money pouch, unable to shake the feeling of nervousness. Suddenly, someone bumped into him. He apologized but quickly grabbed the person's arm. A pickpocket. The person pulled out a knife and tried to stab Beryl in the side, but he skillfully disarmed him. Throwing the knife to the ground, he politely asked for his money back, but the man struggled to get away. Using magic and forcing Beryl to let go, the figure managed to escape, and Beryl was shocked by the magical power. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw his salary on the ground, and also noticed a pendant dropped by the pickpocket. Meanwhile, the pickpocket was starting to catch his breath after running nonstop. He knocked on a door, and a menacing-looking man appeared. He entered the building and was greeted by several rough-looking men. When Mayui placed that day's earnings on the table, a man noticed the amount and accused Mui of stealing it. Mayui, who turned out to be a girl, strongly denied it and told him to count the money. The man looked displeased, and someone intervened, telling him to calm down. The man in the dark clothes, who turned out to be the group's leader, lightly lifted a finger, and the money from the table flew into his hand. He noticed the amount was a bit short and asked what had happened. Mayui admitted that she had messed things up, which surprised the man. He told her it was all right and asked if she had used magic. Mayui quickly denied it. The man warned her that using magic could get her captured and sold as a slave. Tired of being reminded, she asked for the rest of the money. The man announced the amount, saying there was still a long way to go, but believed she could achieve it in less time. When she was allowed to go home, she noticed something was missing from her neck, and the man asked her what was wrong. She replied that her necklace was gone. Meanwhile, Beryl was holding that same necklace, unsure of what to do with it. The next day, he was greeted by Alucia, while looking at the necklace in his hand. She asked about Kuruni, and he replied that she was fine and getting used to the two-handed sword. He said that Kuruni would become even stronger once she mastered it. Alucia felt relieved but realized that changing swords might make Beryl teach her more, but quickly dismissed the thought as she couldn't part with the graduation sword Beryl had given her. Beryl looked at her, confused, and then asked Hembritz for his opinion, noting that Hembritz seemed concerned about Kuruni when she was unhappy. Hembritz was surprised and replied that he was just observing her. He recalled a time when Kuruni was disappointed after failing a mission, when she became unusually quiet, which worried everyone. In the end, she cheered herself up, not wanting to worry the others. He felt sorry for her, as if everyone was telling her she was worthless. Hearing that, Beryl expressed his relief that so many people were looking out for her, thus recalling Kuruni's dream of becoming a knight who could make everyone smile. Alucia also chimed in, acknowledging Kuruni's positive influence on the Knight Order. She didn't say Hembritz's quiet demeanor was a mistake, but urged him to be himself regardless. Not knowing how to react, Hembritz decided to go back to training. Suddenly, Beryl remembered something and showed Alutia a broken necklace. He wondered if he should fix it. While Alutia pouted and asked if it was a gift from someone, she was unaware that she had also noticed his new bracelet. He replied that it wasn't and decided to tell her the story. Meanwhile, on a street, someone was hunched over, anxiously searching for something on the ground. Miyui was sure this was the right place. She had dropped it here and cursed in frustration. Suddenly, someone called out to her from behind, and she reacted angrily at being disturbed, but was surprised to see the man from last night. She quickly tried to run away but was easily caught by Beryl, drawing everyone's attention as she struggled to get free and called him names. Beryl cried out that he just wanted to return the necklace she had dropped, but was interrupted by the city guards, misunderstanding the situation. A guard grabbed Beryl and demanded he stay away from the little girl. Very confused, he tried to explain the situation, but was suddenly pushed to the ground. Miyui saw him and realized she could easily escape now, but hesitated because of her necklace. Just then, someone joined the argument and asked about the situation. It was Fissel. She was surprised to see Beryl on the ground. After clearing up the misunderstanding, the guards sincerely apologized for their mistake, surprised to learn he was an instructor for the Liberio Knights. Beryl thanked Fissel for saving him, while her colleague commented on his ordinary appearance. Fissel asked about the little girl and mentioned that she seemed to possess magical powers. Later, at the Ministry of Magic headquarters, Lucy thought about the situation and ordered them to give Miyui a bath first. This made the little girl feel confused. She struggled to escape while being washed by two people. She couldn't move because Lucy had restrained her with magic. Fissel asked if she was cold, which suddenly made Miyui remember someone who always asked her the same thing. She started to cry, surprising them both. Meanwhile, Lucy was impressed by Miyui's courage in trying to take Beryl's wallet. Beryl apologized for leaving everything to her, and Lucy assured him that she always welcomed anyone with potential, but also wondered about the little girl's circumstances. He recalled what Alutia once said. There were quite a few people who used magic for theft. They are often people trying to improve their magic with their own resources. Talented children, if they awaken their magical abilities, usually rise to higher social classes with their families, as mages are always highly regarded. There must be a reason why this girl continues down the path of thievery. At the dinner table, Miyui couldn't stop drooling as she looked at the food, and Lucy encouraged her to eat, explaining that everything was safe. Lucy introduced herself and asked for Miyui's name. The little girl hesitated, finally revealing her name was Miyui Freya. Lucy then invited the girl to stay at her home, and explained that getting into the Magic Academy would be very easy for her. Even without money, she could live on a subsidy from the country, as could her family. Lucy added that enrolling in the academy would help her perfect her magical abilities and use them to help others, without needing to steal anymore. Miyui was lost in thought, but suddenly she started coughing continuously. Lucy tried to calm her down and check on her, but Miyui suddenly grabbed a knife from the table, pointed it at Lucy's neck, and ordered everyone not to move if they didn't want the girl to get hurt. Fissel was about to draw her sword in anger, but Lucy signaled for her to stop. Miyui confirmed if they were mages, and demanded to be taken to someone who could resurrect the dead. Everyone stopped when Miyui cried out that she wanted to bring her older sister back. Lucy calmly explained that such magic doesn't exist. Hearing this, Miyui ordered Lucy to shut up, mistaking her for a spoiled child who knew nothing. If they couldn't do it, she demanded they give her all their money. Lucy seriously asked who had forced her to do this, pointing out that it was obviously just a scam. She asked Miyui if someone had told her about a spell that could resurrect the dead, but for a large sum of money. Miyui grew angry at Lucy's words, accusing them of capturing people to sell as slaves, insisting that she was better than them. For just 1 million dark, she could see her sister again. Suddenly, Lucy grabbed Miyui's hand and let the knife cut her own neck. Miyui was stunned as Lucy explained that a table knife could only lightly scratch her skin. As she healed herself, Lucy said that while magic to heal wounds exists, even the greatest mages throughout history have never been able to resurrect the dead. She reintroduced herself as the commander of the Ministry of Magic and confidently stated that there was no magic in the universe she didn't know about, and anyone claiming otherwise was lying. After hearing all this, Miyui cried in disbelief, thinking of her sister. Beryl also joined the conversation, asking Lucy if what she said was true. Lucy confirmed it, and Thistle saw Beryl's face, filled with so much anger for the first time. Beryl turned to Miyui, handing her the pendant with a smile. and apologized for taking so long to return it. Mui explained that her sister always wore it, saying it was a memento from their mother. Tears streamed from her eyes as she remembered the day Man came to her with the pendant and told her that her sister was dead. Beryl asked if she knew her sister's whereabouts, and Mayui cried out that she didn't know. He offered to search for her sister together, much to Mayui's surprise. She was suspicious of his intentions, but Beryl reassured her and added that she could become anything she wanted to be, and that she shouldn't be bound by such things. Lucy joined in and pointed out Beryl's scary face again. She asked Mayui about the man she had been giving money to, and Mayui wondered why she wanted to know. She then revealed that his name was Twilight, a man capable of using various types of magic who had a few followers with him. She figured that they couldn't win against him. Lucy sweetly replied that they just wanted to talk to the man and suggested Beryl come along. Beryl quickly agreed while Thistle realized what a terrible situation this was. A situation where both of her masters had teamed up. Meanwhile, at Twilight's hideout, his men wondered why he had tricked Mayui. He replied that he just found it interesting and saw Mui's magic as a way to make more money. He didn't care about her sister's condition, but said she was a waste since it was rare to find someone like her. They were lucky to have gotten her in the first place. As they were talking, they heard a familiar knock at the door, and Twilight assumed it was Mayui. The elusive hands of Twilight, Twilight's mysterious operatives, were said to operate mainly in the kingdom's capital, Vartland. Since the damage they caused to the public was mostly unclear, they were rarely considered a threat. Some witnesses claimed that in the slums, the elusive hands of Twilight were involved in numerous mysterious disappearances, but no one knew the truth. Twilight called out to the person behind the door, but there was no answer. He ordered his men to open the door and check, but one was attacked and sent flying into the back wall. The men were surprised to see a small girl step inside. Lucy entered gracefully while Beryl kept Mayui safe. Twilight pointed out her improper behavior, and she replied sarcastically, apologizing for being so sudden when his man had just pointed a weapon at her. She explained that she just had a few things to ask. Meanwhile, Twilight ordered his subordinate to close the door, leaving Beryl and Mayui outside, as she was surrounded by the others. One of the men insulted Mayui and prepared to end things, saying that only an old man was protecting her. Inside the hideout, Lucy confirmed. If the man was indeed Twilight, Twilight expressed his thoughts, not expecting that Mayui was acquainted with the commander of the magic division. He asked her where she met Mayui, but Lucy refused and used magic to restrain him, saying that she would be the one doing the interrogating. Twilight tried to break free but had no luck. She explained that it was a magic-distorting spell, and only one man had ever escaped from it. She continued her interrogation, asking about the location of Mayui's sister, but Twilight just laughed in response. Suddenly, he was able to break free, much to Lucy's surprise. He clenched his fist and swung at her. Lucy just watched him as her position was blown apart, destroying the wall behind her. Twilight looked at the aftermath and said he would be disappointed if she died from just that. Suddenly, a fireball emerged from the smoke, flying towards him, but he just stood still and took the attack without a scratch. Lucy appeared with a giant ice sword behind her, and immediately launched it at Twilight. But, just like with the fireball, he simply stood his ground and took the hit, shattering the magic sword into pieces. She realized that even a physical object created with magic had no effect, and figured it had to be the cloak he was wearing, the magical equipment of the Shadow Annihilator. Long ago, there was a monster called Manga Formationis that was destroyed by neighboring countries. A mutated Garm variant capable of withstanding all types of magic and digesting it. A cloak made from its hide is equivalent to a suit of armor designed to fight against mages. Just as Lucy thought, Twilight was decked out in magical equipment from head to toe. She leaped into the air, dodging his attack while magically hurling a giant cabinet at his body. But as expected, he easily destroyed it with his bare hands. Twilight vented his hatred for magic, saying that because of it, even a child like her could be stronger than a piece of trash like him. He placed his hand on the wall, causing the entire ceiling to collapse, but Lucy easily defended herself. She stood her ground, amazed at the amount of equipment on him, each piece worth more than a palace. Suddenly a hand shot out from the rubble, and Twilight managed to grab her by the neck. He exclaimed that he knew she couldn't use her full power within the city, especially in this residential area, as it would involve innocent civilians, making this the reason for her defeat. He accused her of basking in the light of praise and glory, but declared that this would be the end of everything. In response, Lucy just scoffed at his speech. When Twilight sensed something was wrong, he looked at her face, at her confident eyes. She retorted that he was nothing more than a child bragging about his toys. Twilight was about to object, but Lucy quickly told him to shut up, treating him like a child. Beryl braced herself for an attack from a man. The man swung his axe, but Beryl dodged and counterattacked, striking his leg, sending him flying. The others were stunned by Beryl's display of skill, including Mori. Inside, a hole suddenly appeared in the floor, terrifying Twilight. He screamed in confusion as he fell deep into the hole. Unexpectedly, he landed in a body of water and was bewildered by the location. Lucy replied that this place was an ancient waterway. She was surprised to see it still flowing and remarked on its vast size as she walked on air. Twilight asked her if this was her plan to unleash her full power, but reminded her that magic doesn't work on him. Lucy was annoyed by his smugness and sense of superiority over mages, just because magic had no effect on him. She explained that he was lucky to be witnessing her special one-time lesson, promising to carve the true nature of magic into his very soul, a phenomenon formed from the use of magical power. This includes the natural abilities of monsters, whether it's shaking the earth or firing a destructive beam of light. All of it falls under the category of magic. Lucy's magic, however, is an artificial replication of that phenomenon and is called sorcery. She doesn't call herself a mage, but a sorceress. Twilight didn't care. He grabbed a piece of the floor and threw it at Lucy, then followed up with enhanced punches, powered by his magical equipment. In response, Lucy manipulated a giant wave of water, sending it crashing toward Twilight. After taking the full force of the attack, Twilight fell to the floor, coughing up all the water he had swallowed. He barely had time to recover, when he was suddenly launched into the air by a giant golem hand that had risen from the ground. He winced in pain, confused as to why his magic digesting ability hadn't blocked the punch. The golem didn't stop, launching another punch, but he managed to block it with his hands, this time destroying the golem's entire arm. Twilight cursed at Lucy when he suddenly heard her voice from behind, followed by a powerful stomp from above, crushing his body into the ground. Unable to speak, Lucy pointed out that while his magical equipment could disperse magic, it wasn't immune to everything. She explained that sorcery is about moving objects without touching them. So even if he could nullify magic, he couldn't erase earth and water. Hearing this, Twilight refused to give up and escaped by destroying the ground beneath him. He quickly grabbed her body, lifting her into the air, and slammed her hard onto the floor. He pointed to his armored collar while taunting her, then stomped hard on her head. Unfortunately for him, it was just a clone. He cursed in disbelief as he was faced with giant arms swinging towards him. He was attacked while Lucy stood in the background, warning him to hold his breath. She manipulated the surrounding water, trapping him in a sphere of water. Twilight tried to escape, but it was no use. She explained that it was a sphere of water with a powerful, constant current, not something he could break through with brute force. She then asked him about the Magi Formationist, a magic-eating wolf that enjoys toying with magic users to steal their magical power and make itself stronger, while also being immune to arrows and bullets. Many believed it was impossible to defeat such a monster. So how could they have possibly subdued it? She asked Twilight, who was confused and struggling to hold his breath. She revealed that it was meant to allow someone proficient in magic to enhance their body to face it. Twilight understood and replied that magic immunity is useless against someone who has poured all their magical power into gaining overwhelming physical strength. Lucy confirmed this and demonstrated it with ease, showing her enhanced arm with magical power flowing through it. Twilight broke out in a cold sweat, realizing what she was about to do. It reminded him of when he was just a kid. His drunkard father would constantly beat and torment him. That feeling of a powerful punch aimed right at you. In a panic, he begged and tried to tell her about Helika's whereabouts, Miui's older sister. He added that he was the only one who knew where she was, and would gladly give her the information if she let him go. He promised they would leave Valtrain and never bother the girl again. He waited for her answer, but Lucy cheerfully refused. Much to his surprise, he desperately tried to change her mind, while Lucy readied her fist, completely ignoring him. With terrifying strength, she punched him so hard that it destroyed the wall behind him, and left everyone around in utter shock, looking at his unconscious body. She concluded that someone bigger was behind the incident, someone who had supplied him with all the magical equipment and was connected to her sister Miui's disappearance. She added that this person definitely knew magic and had taken measures to silence Twilight. She couldn't wait to find out who it was during their next proper conversation. With that done, she assumed the situation upstairs was probably resolved by now, having faith in Beryl's skills. She gracefully left the scene, muttering about how bored she was. Meanwhile, Beryl was cursing the situation he was in. Beryl landed a powerful punch on one of Twilight's henchmen, knocking out a few of his teeth. The men were really struggling against Beryl, as he stood his ground to protect Mayui. Seeing them back off, Beryl thought they had lost the will to fight. He just had to wait for Lucy to capture their leader. Their resistance was stronger than he'd expected, but he was confident Lucy could handle it. Suddenly, one of the men clapped and praised his skills. He had just been watching until now, but Beryl was on a different level compared to the other lackeys and was quite a skilled swordsman. The man expressed his surprise and asked if he was from that place. This left Beryl feeling confused. The man confirmed that the girl who went into the hideout was a commander from the Ministry of Magic, admitting that they were probably done for. Another man called him robbery and angrily urged him to kill Beryl immediately. Unexpectedly, Roberi complied, forcing Beryl to brace for an attack. The next thing that happened, Robbery slashed the throat of one of his own allies, leaving everyone, including Beryl, in shock. Robbery showed his disdain for boring people, then proceeded to cut down another who tried to intervene. He didn't stop, beginning to attack the rest of them, who screamed in horror and confusion as they realized they'd been betrayed. Beryl quickly covered Mui's eyes, not wanting her to witness the brutal scene. Robbery was unfazed by what he'd done, and asked Beryl what was wrong. Beryl exclaimed that there was a child here, while Robbery just smirked, calling him a gentleman. He apologized as he walked into a dark alley, saying he couldn't fight him. Beryl was frustrated, unable to just leave Mui and chase after the man. After a while, the authorities arrived at the scene, looking at the neutralized Twilight. Aludia confirms her prior agreement with Lucy, because if the higher-ups found out Lucy came here on her own, it would cause a huge mess. They had agreed beforehand that Alucia and the Night Order would take credit for securing the hideout, while Lucy would pretend she was just looking for Mayui's sister and had acted in self-defense. That way, she wouldn't be bothered about the incident. Alucia understands and brings up Beryl's sword. He notes that since Bardell hasn't finished it, he'll be carrying a wooden sword. Alucia is utterly shocked and offers to prepare a proper training sword instead, leaving him very grateful. Lucy can't believe he walks around town without a sword, scolding him and calling him a country bumpkin. Back at the scene, Alucia orders the knights to take the surviving gang members to the underground prison. Mayui asks Alucia if Twilight will be put on trial, and Alucia replies that he won't, saying they will interrogate him about the whereabouts of the kidnapped girls and her sister. She notices Beryl helping to clean up while the knights advise him to let them handle the situation. Mayui curiously asks Alucia about Beryl, wondering if he's an important figure. Alucia confirms, while Mayui thinks about how strange he is compared to the way others treat her. Alucia completely agrees. Mayui shares that the name of the man who escaped is Robbery. She suspects he isn't really involved with the Twilight Gang because of his graceful demeanor, which made him stand out among the other gang members. She wants to help in any way she can, and Alucia assures her that they will do their best to find her sister. Later, Beryl finds himself in a noisy tavern, trying to enjoy his meal. Beryl recalls the incident, wondering if he was of any use. He feels pathetic for not being able to do more, but then thinks it's probably for the best to leave things to the girls. He wishes everything could be solved simply by swinging a sword. As he's lost in thought, a man bumps into him, splashing a drink in his face. The man was pushed by a drunk old man. He tries to de-escalate the situation, but the old man decides to throw a punch. Beryl intervenes and grabs the old man's wrist, causing him to go speechless as Beryl tightens his grip, bringing him to his knees. Beryl, looking like a drunkard himself, slurs that he just wants to drink in peace. The other man watches with amusement, while the old man becomes enraged. He quickly strikes at Beryl, and the other guy casually suggests a counterattack. Beryl is surprised but decides to follow his lead, grasping an imaginary sword, swinging it at the man's right flank. He glances at the other guy, while the old man grows even more furious. Together they called out a similar counterattack, a stab to the nape of the neck. They grinned at each other, constantly messing around. The old man's right hand, the left shoulder, left hand or left thigh. They were casually discussing the correct move when the old man burst into a rage. Suddenly the old man drew his sword, threatening them both. They calmly analyzed his attack, predicting the same move. The old man swung his sword, but Beryl simply caught it with both hands, leaving the man astonished. Right after, a wine bottle came crashing down on his head, thrown by the other guy. The guy remarked on his easy victory, wondering if he could do the same if he were serious. After a while, Beryl learned that the man had gone from being a commoner to a knight. He mocked himself, saying he drank to wash away his troubles, weighed down by all the responsibility. Hearing this, Beryl reassured him that he wouldn't laugh, saying he had experienced the opposite. Not long ago, he was just teaching swordsmanship at a dojo in the countryside, which he inherited from his father, but he could never beat him. He only inherited it because his father retired after hurting his back. 20 years later, he ended up with a job in Valtrain, thanks to a former student. Beryl felt that things had worked out in his favor. Admiring the guy for achieving his dream through his own strength, he encouraged the guy, saying that it's important to rest. The guy replied that swordsmen always have responsibilities, disagreeing with Beryl and suggesting he was being held back. The guy believed the day he achieved his ultimate dream would eventually come. Beryl was surprised to hear that, and recalled his father's words. He pondered his own duties. After a moment, he thought of the girls who were probably working hard right now, and felt guilty for drinking to forget his worries. He apologized to Alucia and Lucy in his mind, promising to drink their share for them. Meanwhile, the other man continued drinking outside. Reflecting on what he had said earlier, suddenly 2 figures approached, calling him Shuffle. It was Robbery, dressed like a knight, along with someone else. Shuffle reminded them not to show their faces at this hour, but Robbery replied that they were here on business. The girl announced the capture of the Twilight Gang, and that the bishop was summoning him. Robbery then mentioned meeting an extraordinary swordsman, adding that he didn't look like a knight, but might be stronger than Shuffle. Shuffle mulled over this information and expressed his concern. In contrast to his usual composure, Robbery, Shuffle, and 3 others were gathered in a room, where a girl among them spoke of the difficulty in handling Twilight's situation, predicting that the Ministry of Magic would soon get involved. Robbery commented that it would be more interesting if he were killed on the spot. Shuffle affirmed that they would handle Twilight according to the plan. Meanwhile, at the Knight's headquarters, in the underground prison, the interrogation of Twilight about Miyui's sister, Helica Freya, was not going smoothly. Twilight began to reveal information as promised, but would always stop short each time. Lucy slapped him in anger, and Hembritz asked if this was due to magic. She confirmed that a silencing spell had likely been placed on him, preventing him from revealing certain information. Reluctantly, she considered dispelling the magic, but explained that it would require more help, as there would be no second chance if he broke in the process. Twilight panicked and begged them to stop. Afterward, Lucy and Thistle decided to leave for now and return once preparations were complete. Lucy mentioned it would be faster to take Twilight to the Ministry of Magic, but Hembritz argued that moving him carelessly was unsafe. Lucy then asked if Alucia had started searching for Robbery, and Hembritz confirmed that they had been assigned to security. He then offered to escort them out and asked about their luggage, while Lucy happily led the way. Thistle firmly refused, saying she could carry it herself. Lucy asked if he had done something to displease her, but he denied any memory of such an event. Lucy retorted that his handsome face was surely a sin in itself, which prompted him to object. Recalling their previous sparring match, he remembered dodging several of Thistle's attacks, but was ultimately no match for her magic sword. She corrected him, saying she had only won 3 times and lost 7, prompting Lucy to ask what difference it made if she had won at all. Thistle argued that landing 3 hits was equivalent to a draw. Hembritz and Lucy noted her competitiveness. Lucy laughed and jokingly warned Hembritz that Thistle would never accept anything less than a perfect victory. Unlike a certain someone, Hembritz praised Thistle's strength with the divine sword, attributing it to the swordsmanship she learned from Beryl. He added that they were both taught by the same person, and that he couldn't afford to lose any match. Back in the underground prison, 2 knights were guarding Twilight's cell, when suddenly one knight was struck on the back of the neck and brought to his knees. His partner called out his name, unaware of the attacker above. After easily dealing with the 2 knights, the cloaked figure called out to Twilight in his cell, introducing themselves as a messenger from the bishop. Twilight sighed in relief, but when the figure asked if he had told the knights anything, Twilight quickly denied it, saying the old man's curse had prevented him from doing so. Twilight urgently pleaded for the person to leave quickly, but was suddenly stabbed by them. He coughed up blood in disbelief as the figure replied that his men were waiting for you. They all died in their cells. Suddenly, someone appeared on the scene. It was Kuruni, who saw the attacker and Twilight lying on the ground. She quickly called for backup, while ordering the man to surrender immediately. The man stopped and quickly swung his sword, but Kuruni managed to defend in time, pushing him back with her brute strength. She believed she had the advantage in this tight space. In the blink of an eye, the intruder moved along the walls, somehow managing to cling to the ceiling and attack from above. Kuruni readied herself, noting his long reach, and decided to keep her distance, but the man swept her legs, knocking her to the floor. Just as the intruder was about to strike, he was sent flying into the wall. Kuruni was surprised and relieved to see Hembritz, They saw the man was still able to stand, and Hembritz remarked that he hadn't held back with that attack. Then Hembritz checked on Kuruni and ordered her to take Twilight to the infirmary immediately, leaving the intruder to him. Before he could react, the intruder suddenly leaped from wall to wall to get past him. He tried to escape but was spotted by other knights, forcing him upstairs. Hembritz noted that there was no escape that way. The knights succeeded in cornering the intruder. They were about to restrain him, but were stunned when he jumped off the balcony. They quickly looked down, but saw no sign of him, assuming he had probably died from the fall. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the bushes, leaving the knights in disbelief. The figure took off running, glancing back only to be surprised to see Hembritz had already caught up. Hembritz shouted that he would chase him through the city and ordered his men to get their horses and cut him off. He gave chase, vaulting over railings, amazed that the intruder was unharmed after falling from such a height. As the chase continued, the intruder ran through a crowd. Spotting a cart full of barrels modeled, he decided to kick them towards Hembritz. Hembritz braced himself but noticed a mother and child standing behind him. A woman's scream echoed through the streets, followed by the sound of an explosion. The intruder stopped and looked back, seeing Hembritz holding the two crates, stunned by his incredible strength. The guy decided to run into a nearby facility, making Hembritz think it was a trap. Hembritz didn't hesitate, easily breaking down the door, startling the intruder, who quickly ran upstairs. But he stopped when he saw Hembritz grab his leg, pulling him back with extraordinary force, slamming him against the wall and throwing him outside. The intruder got up and immediately cursed at Hembritz, finally revealing that he was an old man with a large scar on his face. The old man recalled Shupple's words, who had advised him to avoid killing if possible, for fear of provoking the Night Order. He had suggested making it look like Twilight was dead when they found him, and that not being pursued afterward would be ideal. If you can't escape, he advised him not to fight these two, no matter what. The vice captain of the Liberio Knights, Hembritz, also known as the Roaring Blade, had just defeated two knights in a sparring match and was calling for the next group. Evans apologized and surrendered, while the others commented on their vice captain's strength. Hembritz admitted that they couldn't keep up with him. He thought about their lack of combat experience, but there were still many things he wanted to try. He wondered if the current training approach was the best way to prepare them, and whether he could keep up with Alucia and Fizzle just by training. Then he quickly dismissed these thoughts, realizing that overthinking wouldn't help. Suddenly he heard Kuruni thanking Beryl for his efforts, while Beryl replied with extreme exhaustion. Hembritz realized Beryl was running with Kuruni and felt a little sorry for him, as sweat rolled down his face. Beryl suddenly proposed a match, surprising Hembritz during the match, and thought this was his chance. Unfortunately, Beryl got close and wrapped his arms around his body, locked him down, and ended the match. Beryl asked him what was wrong, noticing that he had hesitated. Hembritz apologized for being distracted, reminding himself that brute force wouldn't work against Beryl. He thought he'd had an opening but completely lost his head. Beryl suggested another match, mentioning his move from the previous match and wondering what other options he could have used in that situation. Hembritz was intrigued by this, but asked if it was okay since Beryl was probably tired. Beryl assured him it was fine, saying he was also very curious about it, and wouldn't be able to relax until he tested it out. He added that it was exciting to have someone as strong as Beryl to discuss techniques with. Hearing this, Hembritz felt a sense of clarity, realizing that things were fine just the way they were. It put him at ease knowing that all his efforts weren't meaningless. He thanked Beryl for the opportunity. Back in the present, Hembritz realized that Kuruni was no pushover. The intruder was an assassin who had successfully infiltrated Liberio, which made it clear he was no ordinary man. Hembritz knew that if he let him escape, they would lose Helicophraia's trail, so failure was not an option. He thought about what Alicia would do in this situation, but quickly dismissed the thought. Realizing he was once again thinking about unnecessary things, he cleared his mind and decided to focus. The assassin suddenly threw a pouch at him as a distraction, and quickly seized the opportunity. However, Hembritz didn't panic, and stopped the assassin from drawing his sword. He swung his sword, and the assassin barely dodged, after drawing his blade at the last second. Hembritz didn't stop and tried to close the distance. The assassin tried to predict Hembritz's attack, but was stunned to see him aim for his hip instead of straight ahead. He only managed to block at the last second, but was still pushed back by Hembritz's strength, causing the assassin to grit his teeth, in disbelief at Hembritz's monstrous strength. Out of options, the assassin decided to grapple with him, getting on Hembritz's back and successfully locking him in a chokehold. He exclaimed at his own misfortune, wondering how, of all people, he had to run into a monster like Hembritz as he tried to choke him to death. Hembritz dropped his sword and slammed his fist into the assassin's side, breaking his hold. He then grabbed his arm and slammed him to the ground, followed by breaking his arm. Hembritz said that if he was truly unlucky, he'd run into someone even more terrifying than him. He let go of the assassin's broken arm as the man screamed in agony. Hembritz warned him not to resist any further, but he was shocked when he felt a stab in his side. He was sure he had broken the man's arm, but realized too late that he had used recovery magic. The assassin flipped Hembritz over and elbowed him in the face before trying to run away. Hembritz watched him go, unable to stand properly on his injured leg. As the assassin ran to a street corner, he stopped and cursed when he saw the figure ad, the one person he absolutely could not fight. None other than the commander of the Liberio Knights, the divine light Alutia Citrus. The man cursed as he tried to figure out a way to escape the situation. Determined not to die in a place like this, in the blink of an eye, Alutia zipped past him, leaving multiple cuts on his body. He was confused when he saw his arm was injured and decided to use his recovery magic. After healing his wounds, he executed a slash, followed by a thrust, just as he was about to drive his sword in. Alutia vanished before his eyes, while slicing into both of his sides. He couldn't believe her speed as he saw her charge towards him, stabbing him and pinning him to the ground. Holding her sword to him, Alutia ordered him not to move. As she prepared to apprehend him, she noticed something in his mouth. Immediately after, a sudden explosion occurred, blinding everyone nearby. Hembritz arrived and quickly rushed to Alutia's side, worried for her safety. Alutia reassured him that she was fine, explaining that the intruder had used a magical device to commit suicide. He apologized and tried to take all the blame, but his hand was suddenly stopped as Alutia checked his wound. He assured her that he was fine and that there were no casualties on the knight's side. Alutia expressed her relief and ordered someone to take him for treatment. From the shadows, a woman in a cloak watched the scene unfold. Later, in a forest, the woman reported that Giambi, the old man, had killed himself, but the assassination was a success, so it was one less thing to worry about. Robbery still couldn't believe the man had been defeated and remarked that it was truly difficult to deal with the Liberio Knights. The woman tried to explain that what he did was a noble act, but was interrupted by Shuffle. Tell them to be quiet for a moment. They quickly apologized when they sensed his anger. Shuffle then instructed them to deliver his message to the bishop, advising them to be ready to run at any moment. Robbery doubted this, saying they had nowhere else to go and tried to convince him to change his mind. Robbery wasn't sure either, but added that he had a feeling something bad was about to happen. Miyui's older sister gently patted her hair and told her to behave herself when she went out. Miyui noticed that her sister had been going out more often recently, mentioning that someone had introduced her to a job. Anyway, she was able to eat bread every day because of it. She felt she needed to grow up quickly to help her sister. But one day, she received terrible news from a man. Her sister was dead. The man gave her her sister's pendant and declared that their job was done. Miyui couldn't believe it. She clutched the pendant tightly and accused the man of lying. She screamed in a fit of rage, causing flames to erupt from her body, astonishing the men around her with her ability to use magic. While she was confused by her own abilities, someone suddenly called out to her from behind. Miyui's sister cheerfully announced that she could now use magic and would be able to go to school. She informed Miyui that they would have a place to live together, but Miyui cut her off. Miyui said it was too late. Miyui immediately woke up from the nightmare. She sat up, panting and with tears streaming down her face. Meanwhile, Alutia and Beryl had arrived at Lucy's house, and his jaw dropped when he saw the enormous house. They went inside, and Beryl wondered why Lucy had called them to her house instead of the Ministry of Magic's headquarters. Alutia replied that according to Lucy, it might be inconvenient if other guests were visiting the magic department. When they reached the living room, Lucy welcomed them and told them to sit wherever they liked. Beryl asked about the guest sitting in front of her, but Lucy told him to be patient, adding that she had a question for him first. Then, Alutia asked about the swordsman named Robbery, whom Beryl had met at Twilight's hideout. She wanted him to recall the incident in more detail. Beryl thought for a moment and said that Robbery was likely a sword user. He remembered that he was holding a longsword at the time, but had noticed a habit of thrusting with half his body during the fight, a common stance for piercing attacks. He also vaguely recalled that Robbery had bangs covering one eye and his hair was tied back. Lucy said that was enough and confirmed that his story matched what Hembrits had told them. By kidnapping Mayui's sister, she revealed that they had discovered the ringleader who was supplying magical tools to Twilight, a bishop of the Valtrain Church of the Sven faith, Levios Sarleone. The Sven faith is a religion that believes in Sven as the one true god, originating from the neighboring country of Svendiardvania, and has spread throughout the kingdom of Liberis. A man named Ivroy Hallman, a priest from the Valtrain Church of the Sven faith sect, introduced himself. He confirmed that Bishop Sarleone was his superior and was initially surprised to hear the story from Lucy. However, he'd also noticed some suspicious activities, such as unidentified bodies being brought into the church. While it wasn't uncommon for unidentified bodies to be brought to the church, he couldn't understand why those bodies needed to be handled separately by the bishop. He didn't know what happened to those bodies, and suspected that Moi's sister might have been among them. Another thing was the magic-devouring skin that Twilight was wearing. It was a relic that had been stolen from the Sven faith long ago. The other confiscated magical tools were also far too expensive for an ordinary thief. They also discovered an unusual flow of money in the church's transactions, suggesting the bishop might be buying the bodies from Twilight. Hearing all of this, Beryl couldn't understand why no one had stopped them. Even after knowing all that, Alutia noticed his silence. But he finally spoke up when Ivroy explained that, despite knowing of the bishop's involvement, they still lacked the evidence to act. He thought it was already a fact that the bishop was behind all of this. Lucy chimed in and explained their difficult situation. There's a 9 out of 10 chance the bishop is the mastermind, but without concrete proof. He could just fabricate any evidence he wants. Plus, she couldn't predict how Svendiardvania would react. In the worst-case scenario, this could lead to a conflict between the two nations. So, for now, it's still very difficult to arrest the bishop. Lucy suggested that they could find a witness to testify publicly, but that would take time. She planned to speak with the royal family to close the borders, preventing the bishop's escape. Mayui, standing behind the door, heard all of this. After the meeting, Beryl felt frustrated. He couldn't just sit back and do nothing. He stopped in his tracks, having decided on something. Meanwhile, at the Valtrain Church of the Sven faith, Mayui observed the security situation and concluded that she could easily sneak inside. She quickly made her way to the back, climbed the wall, and landed softly on the ground, only to find someone right beside her. It was Beryl, doing the exact same thing. They were both startled and covered each other's mouths to avoid being discovered. Beryl asked Mayui why she was doing this, but she just asked him the same thing. He explained that he was just there to pray, but she questioned why he had to do it so secretly. Finally, he realized that she had been eavesdropping on their conversation earlier. Unable to deny it, Mayui admitted that she had listened in and just wanted to find her sister. She didn't care who was behind all of this, and was just tired of everything. She felt stuck and useless. If she had been faster, if she had activated her magic sooner, then her sister could have lived a normal life. She was willing to do anything for her sister, but wondered why she was always too late. Beryl watched her in silence, unsure of what to say for a moment, and she cried out that she just wanted to see her sister. Looking at her tear-streaked face, Beryl replied that he understood. He suggested they look for her sister together. Then, Mayui managed to pick a lock and open the door, impressing Beryl. She explained that Twilight had taught her this skill, though she rarely used it. He asked if she would be okay going in alone, but she explained that even if they went in together, there was nowhere for him to hide. Beryl thought for a moment, while Mayui simply asked for his help. If things got bad inside... Mayui carefully explored and entered a storage room. She noticed the building was recently constructed, unlike the others, and seemed built to be inconspicuous. A perfect place for things that needed to be hidden. Suddenly she froze when she heard a door opening. Hiding behind a pillar, she was surprised to see a female knight walk in. Fearing she'd be discovered, she stood perfectly still. Suddenly the knight stopped, sensing something from one of the pillars. She began to draw her sword, but was interrupted by a call from outside. It was Beryl who had decided to act when he saw a knight enter the building, worried for Mayui's safety. Mayui thanked him silently as the knight turned back to check outside, and continued her search. Finally, she found a secret entrance behind a bookshelf, leading down to a basement. She was determined to find out what lay within. Meanwhile, Beryl met the knight, who introduced herself as Euro, a sister of the Sven faith, and also a church knight. She welcomed him warmly, delighted to have a visitor at the church. While Beryl tried to think of a way to distract her, Euro noted that he looked like a swordsman and tried to recruit him for the church's knight order. But Beryl insisted he was just there to pray. She asked if he was troubled by something and what he liked about Sven. Beryl felt overwhelmed by her enthusiasm but decided to play along. Euro spoke passionately about Sven, who was said to be a human swordsman. She explained that the swords the church knights used were modeled after Sven's, and that wielding one was a great honor. She continued saying that Sven fought for the weak and could even perform miracles, like resurrecting the dead. He brought salvation to those living in fear of death, and many followers worshipped him as a god who guided them in their passing. She recited all of this with excitement, making Beryl feel unnerved by her fanaticism. Just then, 2 men entered the church and recognized him as the swordsman who had captured Twilight. Beryl was stunned to see Robbery. As he questioned Robbery's presence, he suddenly sensed danger from behind. He successfully dodged Euro's attack, who was furious upon learning his true identity. Euro drew her sword but was blocked by Robbery's blade, who praised Beryl's skill and incredible strength. Beryl pushed Robbery's sword away and lunged forward to attack, but was intercepted by another knight named Golan. Robbery thanked Golan for his help. While Beryl assessed the situation, Euro was still enraged by Beryl's deception, drawing her sword again, but Robbery stopped her, advising her to calm down. He said that to deal with someone like Beryl, it would be best for the 3 of them to fight with all they had. Meanwhile, Maiwi continued down the stairs and reached a room filled with a series of coffins. Seeing them, she recalled something she had overheard in a conversation between Beryl and the others at Lucy's house. Ivroy had mentioned the bishop's goal, the miracle of resurrection. He explained that miracles were abilities that followers of the Sven faith believed were granted to them by their god. These miracles included the ability to heal and enhance physical strength. As for the miracle of resurrection, that was the highest level of miracle. However, he himself doubted its existence, considering it merely a legend. Despite the skepticism, he had said that some believers and practitioners, as well as those who simply longed to reunite with the deceased, might be trying to replicate this miracle. He speculated that the bishop might be using corpses for this purpose. Looking at the coffins, Maiwi wondered if Twilight had been hiding them from her, and about the fact that her sister might be in one of them. Suddenly, someone stopped her from behind, a masked church knight. The knight asked what a child like her was doing in a place like this. Maiwi quickly apologized, saying she was playing with friends and got lost. An old man standing behind him breathed a sigh of relief and instructed the knight, who turned out to be Shuffle, to bring Maiwi inside. Maiwi suspected this old man was the bishop. Suddenly, Shuffle called her by her full name, startling her and causing her to try and deny it. But Shuffle insisted that while he might not know her name, his subordinates had reported a red-haired girl kidnapped by Twilight. He confirmed if she was the one and asked if anyone other than Twilight knew of this place's existence. Realizing there was no escape, Maiwi used her magic, turning her body into flames, which surprised the bishop. Unfortunately, Shuffle took Maiwi down in an instant, knocking the little girl unconscious, a gasp of disbelief escaping her lips. Shuffle immediately informed the bishop that they needed to leave at once and asked if they could burn all the evidence. The bishop cursed in anger, having to abandon this place when they were so close to their goal. However, he still acknowledged the results they had achieved and planned to continue his research upon returning to his homeland. The bishop decided to take Maiwi with him, viewing her as a precious asset for his experiments. The bishop raised his hand and began to chant, and the coffins opened one by one. Shuffle immediately asked if they were taking these things with them, and the bishop nodded in confirmation, declaring that although incomplete, this was still proof of having reached the domain of God. He looked at the figures stepping out of the coffins, seeing them as the first miracle and the foundation for his plan. Meanwhile, Beryl was still holding his ground against the 3 church knights and their relentless attacks. Robbery signaled to Europe, who immediately cast her miracle, strengthening all 3 of them. Robbery kicked a bench hard, sending it flying towards Beryl, while Golan attacked from the opposite side. Beryl managed to defend himself, but sensed a sudden change in their attacks. He realized they had become heavier and understood the true power of the church knights. The miracles they used made the knights a corps that served the faith of Sven. Famous for using swords specialized for thrusting attacks. Among them, some were capable of casting miracles. Not many knight orders could use these abilities besides them. Beryl skillfully dodged the attacks from Robbery and Euro, as the knights attacked him in unison. Beryl braced himself and parried Euro's sword. Sending it flying towards Robbery, Golan seized the opportunity, but was shocked when Beryl blocked his sword with his scabbard, holding him in place. Beryl immediately attacked, slashing Golan's hand as he tried to block the blade. The sword pierced through and cut into his body. Yuro and Robbery were both stunned as they watched Gollin fall to the ground, blood pouring from his body. Realizing they couldn't win with just the two of them, Robbery called for a retreat but was stopped by Beryl, who managed to injure Yuro. Seeing her heal herself, Beryl realized she was the one capable of using miracles. Beryl realized he was facing one of the strongest members of the Valtrain Knight Order, and the pressure mounted. Yuro, trying to defend against Beryl's relentless attacks, felt helpless. She bit her lip, trying to find a way out of this dire situation. Just as Beryl was about to deliver the final blow, Shuffle suddenly appeared, successfully blocking his sword. After a series of clashes, Beryl stepped back, sizing up his new opponent. He could sense Shuffle's strength, perhaps even greater than that of Slena and Alutia. According to Evroy, the Church Knights of the Sven Faith were a private group of soldiers, handpicked by Bishop Sarleone. Although they didn't hold high positions in the organization, they were all exceptionally skilled. It was rumored that among them was a man known as the Night Hunter. A few years ago, he sent shockwaves through all of Svendirvana, primarily targeting members of the Church Knights, and had even wiped out an entire unit. At first, they thought these incidents were the work of anti-church organizations. But survivors revealed it was the act of a single individual, though the rumors had since died down. Ivroy believed that if the stories were true, he would be a formidable opponent. Beryl realized that the man standing before him was that very person, the infamous Night Hunter. Suddenly, Shuffle whispered something, but Beryl couldn't make it out. Shuffle then instructed Yuro to escape with the bishop first. She initially refused, but Shuffle sternly ordered her to obey. He reminded her to take the children as well, telling her to prepare a spell since they hadn't woken up yet. Hearing this, Beryl lunged for the door, but stopped when he sensed Shuffle's impending attack, feeling as if his throat was about to be pierced. He quickly readied himself and successfully blocked a powerful thrust from Shuffle's sword. Shuffle was surprised by Beryl's ability, parrying a thrust with a technique he'd never seen before. Meanwhile, Beryl realized just how close a call that was. Both men were determined, driven by their own responsibilities. Outside the church, Yuro hesitated, wondering if they should help Shuffle. But Robbery insisted they had to follow his orders, believing their interference would only slow Shuffle down. Model. The fight continued with Beryl on the offensive, but Shuffle managed to dodge, immediately countering with swift thrusts. Beryl was astonished that he could attack from such an awkward posture. He backed away and reconsidered his plan, realizing that due to Shuffle's extraordinary flexibility, it was difficult to read his movements, especially his thrusts. His relaxed body allowed him to move and generate power with each attack, making his speed and timing almost inhuman. At this point, Beryl felt that countering Shuffle's attacks was nothing more than a coin toss. In any case, Beryl couldn't afford to lose this fight and readied his stance. Shuffle watched him, expecting this kind of determination from someone like Beryl. He carefully considered his next move, as Beryl readied himself. The battle was suddenly interrupted as multiple figures poured in through the windows, startling them both. Beryl initially thought they were enemy reinforcements, but quickly realized they were unarmed civilians. On the other hand, Shuffle was clearly annoyed by this move from the bishop, who had ordered the extermination of everyone not part of the church. Beryl readied himself once more as they all rushed toward him. Among them, he noticed a familiar face. For a moment, he thought it was Mayui, but quickly realized it wasn't her. Earlier, before Beryl and Mayui entered the church, he had asked Mayui about her sister. She had quickly replied that her sister was a beautiful person, who was always smiling and put her little sister above everything else. Recalling that even in her final moments, her sister was truly worried about her. As the figures rushed toward Beryl, he tried to warn the girl he believed to be Helica, telling her to stay back. But she grabbed him and threw him into the pews with unbelievable strength. He cried out in surprise and sensed another attack, dodging it just in time. Beryl was stunned by their strength, initially thinking they were using some kind of magic. But he realized one thing: their bodies were strangely cold, making him realize that they had been dead for a long time. It was some kind of magic that could control the dead. Lucy had explained that it was a form of dark magic that allowed the caster to manipulate corpses by infusing them with magical power. He remembered Mui's wish. She had wanted to see her sister again for so long, but not like this. As he thought about this horrific situation, he suddenly heard another window shatter and saw Shuffle escaping. Beryl tried to stop him, but a corpse grabbed his head. He fought back with an elbow, slashing at its leg, but it still wasn't enough to stop them. Uncomfortable with what he had to do, He apologized as he cut down a corpse, but he didn't stop, gripping his sword tightly. He slashed one neck after another. He hacked at a hand that was still grabbing him. He desperately searched for a way to stop them. It wasn't their throats or their heads. It was only when he stabbed through a corpse's heart that it finally stopped. He braced himself as the remaining corpses lunged at him. As he stabbed and slashed at them, Beryl couldn't help but notice the scars on their bodies, each one telling the story of how they died. He pushed those thoughts aside and tried to focus. Seeing the last remaining corpse, he quickly thrust his sword through Helika's heart. As her body fell against him, he saw her bruised face. He paused and closed his eyes, not wanting to imagine the cruelty she must have endured. Miui's words echoed in his mind even in this final moment. Her sister was truly worried about her. He left her body on the floor, covering it with his coat, and immediately chased after the enemy. Suddenly he heard screams about a fire coming from the warehouse, and everyone rushed to put out the flames. He wondered whether he should help or not, but then he saw the tracks of the enemy's carriage. Remembering Miui's words, he decided to pursue the enemy. The words of the man he had met echoed in his mind, that for a swordsman there is always a responsibility. They always have a responsibility. That person believed he wasn't trapped, just as he'd said, but was only preparing for a certain day. A day when he would need to fulfill his own responsibility. His father had stopped him in the past when he pushed himself to the limit to kill monsters and become stronger. His father had told him that he had grown strong, even surpassing his own prime. Even so, Beryl still felt he wasn't strong enough. After running nonstop, his knees finally gave out, causing him to collapse to the ground. He felt an inner voice scolding him for stopping. He reminded himself of his dream to protect everything. He got up and tried to run again. Driven by his promise to Miui, as he struggled to stay on his feet, someone called his name. He was surprised to see Fissel and Kuruni on horseback. Fissel reached out a hand to him, and they immediately started galloping. After he was up, he asked them why they were here. They explained that they had been sent by Alutia, who was very worried about him. At the time, Kuruni couldn't believe that he had infiltrated the church alone. But Alutia was different. She knew Beryl was the type of person who wouldn't stop for the sake of others. Fissel also added that Lucy had praised his courage for infiltrating the church alone, which he greatly appreciated. Suddenly, Kuruni handed him something wrapped in cloth, and he quickly realized what it was. With Slena's help, it was what Bardell had been working on for a long time. None other than the Xeno Grable sword. Bardell, looking tired and sleep-deprived, had given the sword to Kuruni. He noted that although it was finished, it still needed some adjustments. He asked Kuruni to tell Beryl to test it and provide detailed feedback later. Staring at the sword in his hand, Kuruni couldn't help but remark on how impressive it was. Bardell proudly agreed, but was also curious to see how it would perform in Beryl's hands. As Beryl took hold of the sword, Kuruni and Fissel felt a sudden tension in the air. Kuruni gave a nervous laugh, and Beryl expressed his gratitude. Meanwhile, in the enemy's carriage, Robbery was lamenting the delicious food he'd missed out on in Valtrain. Suddenly, Shuffle appeared from above, landing perfectly on the carriage. Startling Robbery, Shuffle removed his mask and urged Robbery to go faster. Robbery immediately complied as Shuffle entered the carriage, where he questioned the bishop, demanding an explanation. He asked why he had given up the bodies so easily. But Sarleone noted that they were effective obstacles, considering the strength of the opponent he had faced. Shuffle countered that they were a crucial part of their plan, but Sarleone replied that while it pained him to let them go, completing the revival for the lost souls was paramount. He believed it would save more souls in the long run, and considered the sacrifice necessary. He reassured Shuffle that their wish was close to being granted. Shuffle understood that, but suddenly grabbed Sarleone by the throat, causing him to cry out in pain. Shuffle admitted that the obstacles had indeed hindered Beryl, who hesitated to cut through them. But to Shuffle it looked as if Sarleone was treating the dead as mere tools. He threatened to make him one of them so he could experience the revival firsthand. As Sarleone struggled to breathe, Euro intervened, warning Shuffle that killing the bishop would mean losing all his research on miracles, including the revival of Lord Sven and the goddess Laffy. Shuffle relented, adding that Beryl must have figured out how to kill them by now, so the bodies would just be lying there anyway. Struggling to speak, Sarleone assured them that the magical traces would be undetectable by the Ministry of Magic, leaving only the bodies Beryl had cut down. He believed that if they could maintain this pace towards Svenjordvania, they couldn't possibly be caught. Shuffle disagreed. He was certain Beryl would pursue them, even if they left the country. He wouldn't care how many people he had to kill to save the girl. It was almost as if they'd stolen a dragon's egg. Sarleone called that absurd, believing no one could get away unscathed. Shuffle replied that none of that mattered. He was sure Beryl would come. He suggested they should lay low for a while. Hearing all this, Sarleone noted Shuffle's confidence and wondered how he could possibly know that. Shuffle had no doubt. After all, he believed this was Beryl's duty. Suddenly, Thistle landed on the roof of the carriage, taking everyone by surprise. She quickly drew her sword, imbued it with magic, and severed the horse's reins. As Thistle prepared for another attack, Euro burst through the carriage roof and grabbed her sword. Robbery seized the opportunity, but was intercepted by Kuruni on her horse. Robbery was surprised as Kuruni slammed his body into the hill with her incredible strength. Euro called out his name but was cut off by Thistle. Thistle imbued her sword with magic, sending Euro's body flying into the air. Meanwhile, Shuffle watched them and realized they had been separated so they couldn't use their miracle together. Sarleone panicked and wondered where the horses were, while Shuffle anticipated the enemy's main force. Sensing an approaching figure, he told Sarleone to run on his own, as he could no longer protect him. Meanwhile, Kuruni and Robbery tumbled down the forested hill. Robbery grabbed onto a tree, swinging his body around to attack, but stopped as he dodged a slash from Kuruni's two-handed sword, narrowly escaping death. He calmly made light of his situation. At the same time, Thistle slammed Euro into an abandoned building. Both of them quickly imbued their swords, clashing against each other. Covering the floor in a blinding light, Euro recognized Thistle from the Ministry of Magic, and Thistle was delighted to be known. Simultaneously, Robbery was amazed by Kuruni's strength, suspecting she might be the famous Roaring Blade. Kuruni denies it, explaining that the person is much stronger than she is. They all stood in a tense stare down, neither side willing to back down. Ever since she was a child, people always treated her differently. Labeled a genius, no one tried to get close to her, and some even called it unfair, saying they could never be as good as she was. When she met Beryl and Lucy, they always praised what she did while calling her name with a smile. For the first time, she felt like her efforts were truly appreciated. In the midst of the fierce battle between Euro and Thistle, she stood up and began to pray, covering her entire body with a miracle. Before she could finish, Thistle launched an attack with multiple magical slashes, striking Euro and causing blood to spray from the wounds. Despite this, Euro adjusted her stance and completed her incantation. Thistle was surprised and realized something about her. She possessed an enormous amount of magic, so much that it was comparable to Lucy's. Euro then expressed her displeasure with Thistle for attacking her while she was praying. Thistle retorted that she found it strange to pray in front of an enemy. But Euro explained that it was a sacred ritual they performed before a battle, asking Thistle if she did the same. Thistle brushed it off, pointing out that they could both use magic without praying and suggesting Euro stop since it created an opening. Euro refused to back down, calling Thistle shameless for not acknowledging the sacred blessings behind their magic. Thistle countered that it was magic, but Euro insisted it was a miracle, causing a brief silence to fall between them. They attacked simultaneously, both showing their irritation. Using her magic blade, Thistle managed to strike Euro first, knocking away her thrust and following up with a slash. Euro didn't stop, instead sweeping her sword toward Thistle, which was blocked by Thistle. Euro didn't stop and swept her sword toward Thistle, but Thistle blocked it and launched several counter slashes, sending Euro's body flying into the air. Euro landed on her feet, turning back with a terrifying expression as she healed her wounds. Despite having landed every attack, Thistle was surprised by Euro's sophisticated healing magic, as Euro's clothes were torn, revealing a long scar on her face. Thistle realized that continuously cutting Euro could lead to her death from blood loss, but Euro's immense magical power would cause Thistle to exhaust herself first. She decided it wasn't wise to prolong this fight. On the other hand, Euro also noticed Thistle's ability to use a sword in addition to her magic blade. She expected that she wouldn't win by technique alone. However, she believed it was time for her miracle to take effect. Thistle readied her stance but was shocked to feel her sword growing heavier. Euro seized the opportunity, thrusting her sword towards Thistle, but was surprised to see Thistle still able to block the blow. Thistle struggled and realized it wasn't that her sword was heavier, but that a spell to weaken her strength had been cast from the very beginning. She felt the strength in her arm gradually fading, but managed to block Euro's slash by reinforcing her arm with magic. Seeing this, Euro decided to stomp her foot down, causing the floor to collapse. Leaving Thistle in a defenseless position, Euro prepared to attack. while Thistle tried to figure out a way to dodge. After deactivating her magic blade, Yuro punched Thistle hard, slamming her to the floor with immense force. Thistle gripped the sword that had grazed her body. Yuro realized Thistle had used magic to reinforce her arm, in exchange for being unable to use her magic blade. Magic is usually taught like copying notes. To use it, you have to practice writing it over and over again relentlessly. And to be able to use another spell while one is active would be extremely difficult even for someone like Yuro, who specializes in using miracles. Yuro reinforced her fist and delivered a powerful punch to Thistle, while excitedly praising Sven. With a flushed face, she thanked her god for saving her life despite being abandoned at birth with an illness, as she laughed fanatically. Thistle quickly grabbed her sword and managed to escape in time, dashing into the wall. With a bruised face, Thistle realized that even though she had maintained the reinforcement spell on her arm, Yuro's abundant source of magical power allowed her to cast healing spells and enhancements indefinitely. Thistle recalled a similar situation during her past match with Hembritz. She had run out of magic and couldn't hold her sword, and in the end, after that match, she had cried while practicing with her sword while her friend encouraged her. Her friend explained that Hembritz and Karuni had overwhelming power, and it was normal for her to be at a disadvantage when she ran out of magic. Thistle disagreed, retorting that as the disciple of the strongest magician and swordsman, she was more blessed than anyone else and could not afford to lose no matter the cost. Thistle readied herself as Yuro charged towards her. Suddenly she let go of her sword, surprising Yuro. Looking at the sword, Yuro was shocked to see it glowing. Before she could react, it slashed into Yuro's body. She was surprised to see Thistle skillfully wielding the sword. Thistle didn't stop and made her sword spin, charging towards Yuro at great speed, making it difficult for Yuro to defend against Thistle's continuous attacks. With a single swing, Thistle was able to punch Yuro in the face, blinding one of her eyes as she cried out in pain. With her vision limited, Yuro struggled to find Thistle's sword, which was now behind her, stabbing into her body in the blink of an eye. Blood sprayed from Yuro's mouth as she realized what had just happened. Even so, Yuro grabbed Thistle's sword, preventing her from controlling it. While also leaving herself defenseless, Yuro quickly stabbed Thistle, hitting her in the shoulder and pushing her against the wall. Then she shouted out her victory to God. But Thistle didn't give up. She grabbed the sword still lodged in Yuro's body, warning her to prepare herself. Yuro had to face the grim realization of what was about to happen, enhancing her sword with magic. Thistle quickly slashed through Yuro's body from the inside, while Yuro coughed up blood in agony, unable to heal herself as her body collapsed to the floor. Thistle stood over Yuro and proudly declared that there were two who had guided her. Model,